There are conflicts being waged all around us, ones we can't see. Hackers are poised to dominate the 21st century, reshaping geopolitical landscapes. Sometimes on behalf of terrorists, but often for governments, or just because they think it's right. As a reporter, I've been covering national security for Vice, and increasingly my job is to track these digital battles. There's one computer virus that really showed how far everything had come. In the early 2000s, the US began to fear that Iran, its sworn enemy since 1979, was secretly developing its own nuclear weapons. The UN responded with sanctions. The US and Israel threatened war. And then, a mysterious computer virus dubbed Stuxnet appeared in June 2010.
We're headed to Symantec. Yes, the same company that's protecting your desktop from malware, to talk to an engineer and expert who forensically took apart Stuxnet and figured out that it wasn't just some run-of-the-mill Trojan virus.
I got in touch with Symantec security researcher Eric Chen. He did some of the most in-depth analysis of the virus when it first appeared.
The average threat that we look at can take us 5 to 20 minutes to look at, and we know exactly what it does. And Stuxnet took us months, more than 3 months to look at. So it just can give you a sense of how difficult, how large, and how complicated the threat was.
So why don't you tell me how you discovered Stuxnet?
So basically what happened was another security company that was based in Belarus found this binary, and it had something in it that was called a 0-day.
Why don't you tell me what a 0-day is?
A 0-day basically is when you have what's called a vulnerability, or you have a hole sort of in your computer, a bug of some sort, that allows someone to execute code on your machine without you knowing it. Your computer just has to be on and maybe even connected to the internet, and that's it. You don't have to be logged in, you don't have to be browsing the web, you don't have to double-click on any files. And so that means you have no way to protect yourself.
What about it had you never seen before?
An average threat doesn't have any sort of exploit inside of it. This thing had 4 0-days inside of it.
What sets a 0-day apart is that it's a security flaw that there's no fix for. 0-days are incredibly rare, and for that reason, incredibly valuable.
What was the specifics of it that set off an alarm?
There's these SCADA strings inside. SCADA basically is technology that's controlling robots and automation, or power plants and things like that. And we had never seen a threat that mentioned anything to do with SCADA. This thing could actually be attacking some sort of national critical infrastructure. This isn't like 2 kids in the basement in Kansas throwing some code together. This thing had a full-on framework, clearly had quality assurance behind it. Here we're talking about something that is just orders of magnitude greater than we've ever seen before.
As their investigation deepened, Eric and his team realized Stuxnet was designed to target computers using Siemens' proprietary software, called Step 7.
What first caught our eye were all these strings like S7, and we began to sort of Google those sorts of strings. We saw WinCC, and we saw Step 7. And when we looked those up, we determined that this was actually software that would control PLCs.
PLCs are programmable logic controllers, computer systems used for converting digital code into physical commands that automate everything from factory machinery to heating and cooling systems. Eric now found himself in unknown territory, so he reached out to the international security community.
We were sending out blogs all throughout that summer, telling people, if you're a PLC expert, if you're an expert in critical national infrastructure, contact us. Because we didn't even know what a PLC was at that time.
Eric and his team learned that PLCs are extremely vulnerable to cyber attacks, but he still didn't know which machines were the targets. This sophisticated malware, or malicious code, was detected on industrial control systems around the world. Cybersecurity analysts were puzzled. At the same time, Homeland Security was also trying to understand the virus. Sean McGurk was the director of NKIC, the cyber branch of the Department of Homeland Security, when Stuxnet was identified.
What did your team see when they took it apart?
Well, the first thing we saw was that it was very sophisticated in its communications capability. So if you think of Stuxnet like a kinetic device, like a missile, you had the delivery vehicle, that which put the payload on target, if you will, and then the payload itself, and they were very unique characteristics to both. Stuxnet's ability to do digital reconnaissance without control, it was essentially a digital, fire and forget type of approach. The fact that it used, 4 0-day vulnerabilities to gain access to the network is something that you had not seen in code before. Someone willing to risk that many 0 days in order to get it in place. And then when we saw the payload part, which was actually specifically targeting an industrial control environment, that's really, for us, became a very significant event, because normal malware doesn't go after control systems, and this was specifically focused on control systems.
It was nonstop for weeks. This was all we thought about, all we worked on. And you can imagine it was a really big shift from what we had done before. The average threat, we would finish in 5 to 20 minutes. And here we were sitting on the same threat day after day, hour after hour, night after night. And we weren't getting bored. Every single day, every single week, we were discovering new little clues, new little breadcrumbs that kept us going and kept us digging and kept us looking until basically November, when we finally figured out that this thing was indeed sabotage on Natanz.
In what was basically an accident, Eric and his team found themselves embroiled in a real-life international spy thriller. Complex malicious code had been written specifically to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, while its authors remained in the shadows. In 2002, the world discovered that Iran had been building a secret uranium enrichment facility near the town of Natanz. The Stuxnet computer virus has a direct link to this controversial plant.
The fact that Iran never declared the plant made it suspicious. That was a breach of Iran's obligations.
James Acton knows nuclear policy inside out. He also keeps tabs on the work of the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, the world's nuclear watchdog.
Can you tell me what the climate was around the discovery of Natanz?
Iran's a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And one of the requirements of that is that you're allowed to do pretty much anything you like in the nuclear field, short of building a bomb. But you have to declare it. And not declaring nuclear facilities is a violation of your agreement with the IAEA. It found activities that looked very much like what you want to do if you'd build a nuclear weapon.
And why were they so interested in the Natanz? Like, why was it the straw that broke the camel's back?
Natanz was a controversial plant because, firstly, any enrichment is inherently sensitive. It's inherently dual use. You can use it for fuel production or you can use it for nuclear weapons production. The size of the plant was suspicious. The plant's actually too small for a civilian plant. Military plants don't need to be as large as civilian plants, so it was scaled as though it was right for making enriched uranium for weapons, but wasn't the right size for enriched uranium for nuclear reactors. The discovery of the Iranian program did cause a lot of concern. I mean, there were a lot of countries who were genuinely, and are genuinely, very fearful that Iran would get the bomb and fearful of the consequences of it doing so.
Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Iran denied that Natanz was being used to produce nuclear weapons. Still, its government bowed to pressure in 2003 and temporarily suspended uranium enrichment and processing activities at Natanz. Then, in 2005, newly elected President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad defiantly restarted the program. Within months, the facility at Natanz was up and running, and enriching uranium all over again. Concerned, the UN imposed sanctions. By 2009, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu challenged the US to stop Iran's nuclear program.
The most urgent challenge facing this body today is to prevent the tyrants of Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Netanyahu was privately considering airstrikes on Natanz. It's during this high-stakes political standoff that Stuxnet is detected in June 2010. In fact, Stuxnet was found in countries around the world, but infection rates in Iran were off the charts. And at the plant at Natanz, centrifuges were breaking down at unprecedented rates. Stuxnet's design is complex, but its operation is deceptively simple. Like a security camera, the virus records 30 days of normal centrifuge operation while it hides in the system. Then, when Stuxnet attacks the centrifuges, it plays back the pre-recorded data so operators on the outside can't see the infection raging within the centrifuges.
And those 30 days were not a coincidence. That's how long it takes basically for a cascade of centrifuges to basically get fully loaded with uranium gas. So they wanted to basically have their sabotage effects happen right at the peak moment and cause them the most damage. So the centrifuges in Natanz normally will spin at 1,000 hertz. And what the threat did was spin up the centrifuges to either 1,400 hertz to be really fast, or slow them down to 2 hertz to be really slow. And what would happen is, when they spin up really, really fast, the centrifuge would basically vibrate uncontrollably and just shatter. And you would have literally shards of aluminum flying across the room, maybe a domino effect of centrifuges falling and toppling on each other, and uranium gas leaking everywhere. Eventually, they would hit the big red button to cause shutdown. Stuxnet was smart enough to also hijack that. That big red button went through a computer as well, and they hijacked that code and basically would ignore it and allow their payload to take effect.
Once it was inside, it was unstoppable.
They were doomed, yeah. The operators were doomed, the plant was doomed.
Stuxnet was the first digital weapon known to have physically destroyed its targets. But the computer systems at Natanz weren't connected to the internet. So how did Stuxnet get inside the system? By 2010, it became evident that someone had decided that measures more drastic than sanctions and less spectacular than airstrikes were needed to slow down Iran's nuclear program. Because out of nowhere, a mysterious supervirus named Stuxnet was sabotaging an Iranian nuclear facility. But the computers in the facility weren't online, so the question remained how the virus got inside the system. I went to find Darknet J, an operational security expert, to understand how Stuxnet could have infected them.
So how did Stuxnet jump the air gap and infect Natanz?
It jumped the air gap by traveling on a USB stick that was placed into the computer from someone.
Darknet J replicated the USB exploit to show me how Stuxnet infected the computers at Natanz.
All right, so what happens is you put in the USB, you open up the folder, Windows looks for an icon, which is a malicious payload that can write to system. I have it opening calculator.
So once the intended target opens the folder with Stuxnet inside of it, what happens next?
Essentially, it can have complete control of your computer, meaning that it can write anything to the hard disk. It can grab credentials from the internet if you put them in at the time. It can also propagate itself inside of your local area network.
Wow.
It's keys of the kingdom.
That meant someone physically walked Stuxnet into the Iranian facility, likely an unwitting engineer with an infected USB. Inside, the virus wreaked havoc. Centrifuges were destroyed, and the Iranians were clueless. But then Eric Chen and his team at Symantec announced the details of Stuxnet to the world in a blog post. Then Natanz shut down. Most assumed Iranian authorities finally understood the mess they were in and were trying to clean it up. After that, 2 Iranian nuclear scientists were targeted by motorcycle-riding assailants who slipped a sticky bomb onto one of their cars. One was killed, the other seriously injured. It appeared whoever was behind Stuxnet went to Plan B. Soon after, the Iranian president admitted a virus caused the shutdown in Natanz.
البته با نرم افزارهایی که در قطعات الکترونیکی نصب کرده بودند با
He blamed Israel, but couldn't back it up with any hard evidence. The assassination sent a chill through the cybersecurity community.
Did it make you a little bit nervous?
We would look in our rearview mirrors all the time, and I would see a motorcycle and watch them closely. It definitely wasn't lost on us that we were in the middle of some big geopolitical affair.
Iran openly accused Israel and the US of being the masterminds of Stuxnet. I went to talk to someone who was trying to stop the crisis from escalating further.
Beautiful day.
Jamal Abdi is a foreign policy analyst for the National Iranian American Council and has advised congressional members on relations with Iran.
People like myself who were trying to broker a diplomatic solution, trying to figure out an off-ramp from these escalatory moves, I really thought this is an extremely bad turn.
What was the reception of Stuxnet in Iran? How did people feel about it?
I think the Iranians very credibly believed that Israel was behind this. And then there was also just the fact that there were all these other sabotage efforts that they believed Israel was connected to. Israel was, in many regards, the driving force against Iran's nuclear program.
And then you have a hardline government like Ahmadinejad that's essentially inflaming the issue.
It was, how do we slow that down as much as possible because we know we can't stop it.
But it wasn't until 2 years later that the New York Times published an explosive story, revealing the US was behind Stuxnet. Unnamed officials told the paper the US created the virus with help from Israel. It was part of a covert operation dubbed Olympic Games. The allegations set off a political firestorm, so a federal probe was launched to investigate the leak. But in 2015, the investigation was put on ice over U.S. fears of what might come out in court.
For me, it always comes down to the leak investigation. You don't launch a leak investigation for a covert operation you didn't do.
Kim Zetter has been covering the Stuxnet story for Wired since the virus was first discovered.
The United States likely did Stuxnet.
I don't think that there's a question that the U.S. is behind it. I mean, it's not even something that I think that we, have to sort of debate. Stuxnet was a precision weapon, so it would never destroy anything except what matched a very specific configuration. And you can see lawyers' fingerprints are all over Stuxnet.
I think that's the first time I've heard someone say that lawyers' fingerprints were all over Stuxnet.
Yeah, you can see that as they were designing this, the lawyers would have had very tight restrictions for controlling this. They would have told the developers, this can only affect the systems that are targeted. You have to write this in such a way.
It likely blocks out two major nation states that could have done it, China and Russia. I'm not sure they would have cared too much about the legal implications.
This was one of the reasons that people were so certain it was the U.S.
All of the available clues suggested that Stuxnet was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, but government officials have gone to great lengths not to acknowledge it.
So the evidence is lacking.
I think that there is no clear complete evidence or even complete indication that it was one country or another.
To this day, the US government will not confirm or deny its role in Stuxnet. Stuxnet's architects might want to stay in the shadows, but around the world, other governments took notice of the cyber weapon they'd unleashed. When security researchers found Stuxnet and publicized the discovery of the destructive malware, they inadvertently brought a covert operation to a premature end.
By the time we discovered Stuxnet, it's believed that it already had delivered its payload at least once. So I'm sure the attackers would prefer that it wasn't uncovered, because maybe they could have continued or continued further operations, but it at least accomplished its goal, at least according to the IAEA documents that showed that a few thousand centrifuges were destroyed just before 2010.
But what effect did it have on the nuclear standoff between Iran, Israel, and the West?
Looking back on this, there's no question that it slowed down the program.
Was it a successful attack in that sense?
It kind of partially depends what you mean by success. I think Stuxnet probably played a role in convincing Israel not to attack Iran and giving diplomacy more of a chance.
Stuxnet may have just slowed down Iran's nuclear weapons program by 6 months to 2 years, buying time for diplomacy. But it didn't exactly stop Iran from pursuing the bomb.
Do you think it was effective?
It was, one step forward, two steps back. It delayed Iran's program, certainly, I think, by several months, maybe a year. But it also, politically, it convinced Iran that they were under siege. It made an argument, a case for why Iran needed to have capabilities to counter cyber warfare, as well as capabilities to defend the country. If Iran wants to develop nuclear weapons, they can develop nuclear weapons. This is not a technical decision, it's a political decision. And Stuxnet was a technical response that maybe on a technical level slowed the program down, but on a political level actually helped to accelerate the program. So I think in that regard, if you're looking at actually preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons or convincing them to not go down that route, Stuxnet was a failure.
Finally, after years of crippling UN sanctions, Iran agreed to limit their nuclear program in 2015 in exchange for a partial lifting of sanctions. But by deploying Stuxnet, the US and Israel had triggered a different kind of arms race.
This was an active war. And it was an active war without there being a war. If you drop a bomb on someone, they know that they've been attacked, right? But in digital warfare, you may never know that you're under attack. The US opened a door that everyone is going to walk through now.
In Iran, was Stuxnet seen as an active war?
In Iran, it was seen as an active war. And there was sort of a question that was opened up. Did the United States just declare war on Iran? It's such a gray area, though. So I think that even now, people are still kind of trying to figure out whether this constitutes war or not. But technically it was. And I think inside of Iran, it was really viewed that way. And I think it really opened a lot of eyes inside the establishment of Iran that they needed to get savvy in this field to be able to defend as well as attack. And so you've got the formation of the cyber army inside of Iran that was initially really aimed at activists inside the country. But then after Stuxnet, it became even more formalized. All kinds of money was poured into it because this was now not just an internal threat, but an external threat.
it spurred Iran to be more offensive.
It spurred everyone to be more offensive. That's the thing. It's not Iran. There are other people to be worried about than Iran. All of that together has created this arms race of other countries.
Would you agree that it was the dawn of a new chapter in cyber warfare?
The expected response is that a lot of other countries now are establishing offensive cyber operations. They don't want to be left behind.
Stuxnet had launched the race to militarize cyberspace. And the more the world is connected, the more targets there are for attack. Countries around the world are racing to design new malware for the next generation of warfare.
Do you think it's going to become another tool in the toolbox of war?
Absolutely. Stuxnet to me was a Trinity moment, and by that I mean the first Trinity explosion, demonstration of a nuclear detonation in New Mexico. We demonstrated a capability that you could have devastating physical impacts by cyber means.
It was a bit like the bomb. Once the secret was out, people started getting it for themselves.
We started recognizing that there's no putting this back. The key was turned, the lid was opened, and everything in Pandora's box was now out in the open, and there was no way to get it back in.
Stuxnet was the world's first known cyber weapon. It set the stage for a new kind of war, one that will play out on a digital battlefield. The industrialized world runs on an infrastructure that we take for granted. When things are running well, they're pretty easy to forget about. But critical infrastructure has always been a prime target in war. Destroying a power grid or water system can paralyze the enemy. And as more and more of that kind of infrastructure is connected to digital networks, experts are finding it's also vulnerable to cyber attacks.
In the control system world, if something fails, it's obvious. The lights go out, a pipe breaks. What you don't know is, did cyber play a role in what happened?
Joe Weiss has been an industrial control systems engineer for almost 40 years. Joe took me to a power station in California. That state's power grid was allegedly hacked by China in the early 2000s.
Okay, ICS stands for Industrial Control Systems. It's essentially a ubiquitous term that we're using to cover this range of things that monitor or control physical processes. So like what you see over here, all of this stuff is controlling the electric system.
So someone from China could effectively gain access to a network that's controlling something in California.
Yes, I don't think there's any question that there are nation states that are targeting critical infrastructure, electric, water, pipelines, you name it. We've already had, many years ago, documented where China did try to meddle with things here, like this.
What did they do?
They hacked into what's called the California Independent System Operator, which is in Folsom, California, which is what, on an overall basis, controls this.
And if they had, what are the sorts of things we could have seen? Because that's obviously an attack, right?
That was obviously an attack, correct.
And what would have been a fallout if they had?
Again, depending on what they would have done, they could have affected, power to hundreds of thousands of customers.
Shut down California, one of the most important states.
Well, they could have certainly played havoc with the grid.
This attack is just one case. The real turning point was in 2009. It was a sophisticated computer virus called Stuxnet, and it infiltrated and destroyed nuclear centrifuges at a controversial uranium enrichment plant in Iran. Observers agree the attack was likely a joint US-Israeli operation. The critical infrastructure war was on. But I want to know how hackers get inside critical infrastructure in the first place.
Nice to meet you.
Ben.
Pleasure.
Meredith Patterson is an expert in protocols, the instructions machines use to communicate with each other.
A control system is just a system that takes some reference value and then monitors a centrifuge or a turbine or a fan, any kind of device that has some property that can be measured, temperature, speed, direction, whatever.
Like a power plant or
Yeah,
a nuclear
absolutely.
power plant or
Completely.
critical infrastructure.
Yeah, a dam, anything like that.
And are these things secure?
Well, one of the problems with industrial control systems is that the protocols that are used in them are extremely complex. So if you have systems from different vendors that are using different implementations, you can sometimes end up with crosstalk, essentially, because they're speaking different dialects of the same protocol, and one ends up introducing a mistake into the other.
So if I'm reading this correctly, you're saying that at times, the software involved with some of the most critical infrastructure we have, like nuclear power plants, can break down? Can the code essentially, like there's an exploit, there's a vulnerability?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Vulnerabilities are driven by the inputs that people send into systems. And so if an attacker has any way to control or modify the input that is being sent to a system, they could send it false inputs, they could send it syntactically incorrect inputs. It is remarkably easy to just mess with the temperature someplace in a natural gas plant and catch the entire plant on fire. I mean...
Really?
Oh yeah, like Baytown near Houston just frequently has problems with a refinery catches and the entire river goes up for about a day.
And that's something that could be done if someone got into the system.
I mean, this is something that happens by accident already, right? So if somebody were to get into the system, then yes, you could totally set the river on fire.
That threat is real, and the highest levels of government know it. Michael Chertoff was the Secretary of Homeland Security under George W. Bush. He now runs a cybersecurity consulting firm. What's the biggest threat to America's critical infrastructure? What's the thing that scares you the most?
Well, if you're talking about what would cause the greatest consequence, I would say anything that affects transportation, energy, or finance, or healthcare would be potentially have a very, very big impact on the United States. But here's the dangerous thing. We are now moving into what they call the Internet of Things, where everything is going to get, quote, smart. So as we build out all these, widgets that have connectivity and wireless, we've got to think to ourselves, what happens if somebody enters using that wireless and begins to affect the actual physical operation of the system? There's also a lot of debate about what the laws of war would be if we did have a cyber conflict. And again, that's not about stealing information. That's literally about using cyber tools to blow up something like a power plant or to kill people by causing an airliner to crash. And so that we've got to begin to think about what are the rules of war if, God forbid, you wind up with a cyber war.
Critical infrastructure is clearly a target, and attacks against them aren't a pipe dream. They're actually happening. I go to meet someone who knows about hacking critical infrastructure and works to prevent it.
Yes.
Chris Kubeka is an independent security consultant. She says she first got into hacking as a kid.
What'd you hack into?
The FBI and the Department of Justice.
And how old were you?
I was 10.
What?
And I had no idea I was really doing much of anything because it was really easy.
Back in August of 2012, malware dubbed Shamoon infected the network of Saudi Arabia's national oil and gas company, Saudi Aramco. Kubeka was hired to assess the damage.
Why don't you tell me what Shamoon is?
Shamoon was a piece of malware that began to randomly wipe over 35,000 Windows-based computers in Saudi Aramco. When it was discovered what was going on, individuals inside Saudi physically pulled plugs to keep it from getting further.
And what was the damage?
The damage was about 85% of their IT systems were knocked out. And when I say IT systems, it wasn't just your desktop computer, it was the servers they connected to, payroll systems, databases, any sort of data that held research and development, all the way up to the voice over IP phones.
Did that target any, let's say, critical infrastructure, oil production?
Yes, it appeared that the attack was meant to target the production systems to take them down.
So it was actually a critical infrastructure attack?
Yes, absolutely. It was targeting it, yes.
Who did it?
According to Saudi Aramco, they think that the Iranians did it.
And would you agree with that?
It seemed like it was an extremely political attack done in a way that was extremely damaging to Saudi business culture. It seemed like either it had to do with a group related to the Saudi Arab Spring or Bahrainian Spring, which was going on at the same time, or perhaps it was Iranian.
Have critical infrastructure attacks increased since Stuxnet and Shamoon?
Yes, they have, absolutely. More and more people are aware of them. So now curiosity is peaking. And if you went from just writing code to writing code and being able to move things, attacks are going to get more and more as curiosity peaks. And also, these systems are more and more connected to the internet quite openly. They're just kind of open game.
The Shamoon virus was probably the most destructive attack that the private sector has seen to date.
After Shamoon, U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta sounded the alarm.
The collective result of these kinds of attacks could be a cyber Pearl Harbor.
How would cyber attackers find their targets? I learned, in fact, that there is a search engine called Shodan dedicated to scanning devices connected to the internet. John Matherly is its architect.
So what am I looking at here?
Shodan is a search engine that, unlike Google, which just looks at the web, Shodan looks at the internet, which can include much more than just the web. All these devices are becoming connected, and Shodan finds them. It can be buildings, water treatment facilities, factories, webcams, offices, everything that you can possibly imagine. If it can have a computer inside it, Shodan's found it. So this is a 3D globe where the red dots represent publicly accessible control systems. So these are control systems that are exposing the raw protocols. There's no authentication on any of these. You just connect and you have full access.
America is just a big red blob.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Most connected country in the world, it's not that surprising, but yes, very, very connected.
What was one thing you saw where you said to yourself, like, how the hell did this get up online?
There are a lot of things like that. A big one was one in France. It's the hydroelectric dam. It generated like a few megawatts of power. It was pretty big. And actually, I can show it. And this one actually had a web interface, which is unusual, that showed a real-time view of how much power was being generated. And it also had all sorts of other stuff exposed. That's actually a common theme with ICS devices. They will give you serial numbers, they're going to give you firmware versions, because it was meant for engineers to maintain remotely. And if you're a remote engineer, you want to know what you're working with. And then you look at the history of it, and there's a history of flooding. Like, there are known flooding instances of this dam, and it took 2 years of poking and prodding for these guys to secure it.
Do you think something this vulnerable and this shitty is lying around in the US somewhere?
Most likely, yes. A lot of the guys operating these things didn't understand that if you can access it remotely without logging in over the internet, so can everybody else.
Shodan proves that critical infrastructure is in danger all over the world. But who else has figured that out, and what are they doing with it? Everyone was telling me that critical infrastructure control systems were not only outdated, but ripe for an attack. If accessing them could be as simple as finding them on the internet, how hard could it be to trigger the nightmarish damage everyone was warning about? I went to meet Stuart McClure, the founder and owner of a security firm called Cylance. He shows me a device called a Programmable Logic Controller, or PLC. PLCs have been around since the 1960s, but in the digital age, they're the weak link for hackers to exploit.
First off, why don't you explain to me what a PLC is?
Yeah, PLC is a programmable logic controller. Basically, it controls the physical world by programming or computers.
So you typically find these, though, in a lot of critical infrastructure, right?
Absolutely. Any kind of oil and gas or industrial control systems, anything that tries to control, like I said, the physical world or physical elements for power or oil and gas, transportation, you name it. They all require the use of PLCs in some form or fashion to make them work every day.
As I understand it, PLCs are quite buggy and easy to exploit, are they not?
Well, yeah, they're built on 30, 40 years of code that has really never been audited for security, or very rarely. So they often have a lot of vulnerabilities and exploits that have yet to be discovered. And of course, hackers love that.
So you know how to hack a PLC?
Yes.
And you're going to show us?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's get to it. Let's try it out.
So what this is a rig that we built to represent the physical world out there that usually has very large versions of these things. This PLC is hooked up to this air pump and compressor, which is going to allow us to overpressurize a bottle and make it explode. So,
and are you going to run any code on it? Or is it just
I'm actually running code that we have in Python right now. First, we set our variable to the IP address of the PLC, then override our memory address here, mx0.0, which is the area and ladder logic, which allows us to control the safety disable, and overwrite that, which allows us to control the PLC itself and do anything we want with it. So, would you like to do the honors? All right. Just hit enter. Judas Priest.
That actually sounded like a bomb.
Now I won't hear for a while, but that was good.
Why is it so easy to control a PLC?
Well, it's so easy because the way that these things have been designed, they never really considered security from the ground up. So when they design them, they design them just to work. Now what's happening is more and more of them are getting hacked up, which is requiring manufacturers to go back and redesign them.
And you don't think this is just needless fear-mongering, do you?
I wish it was. Then I could sleep a lot better. You can make it more difficult, you can make it more challenging, but at the end of the day, it's built so foundationally insecure that it makes it incredibly easy for attackers to gain access.
All the experts I've spoken to say our critical infrastructure is vulnerable, and I wonder what Washington is doing about it. The best guy to ask that question is Michael Daniel. He advises President Obama on cybersecurity issues.
So what's the attack that keeps you up at night?
I would say it's one that is focused on our critical infrastructure that has some unintended consequences. That's the one that really, I think, worries me, because we don't really actually understand how these incredibly complex systems actually interact with each other.
So you fear that another superpower might infiltrate critical infrastructure and set off an unneeded conflict?
So that is certainly a concern, although I would actually say that I'm less worried about that than I am other actors that have less interest in the overall sort of international current, status quo.
Well, who are these adversaries?
So, the Director of National Intelligence has talked about them in his testimony. So Iran and North Korea certainly top the list, although we are not unconcerned about the terrorists and other actors who don't build themselves so much as terrorists, but certainly cyber hacktivists and others.
Everything's crackable.
You could not prevent all cyber intrusions. That's just impossible. You'll never be able to prevent all of them. Everything is penetratable eventually.
Everyone's told me that no critical infrastructure system is bulletproof. And one US government agency is trying to keep track of the cyber attacks happening across the country.
We're about to meet with Martin Edwards, who's the guy tasked by Homeland Security at ICS CERT to protect US critical infrastructure against a cyber attack.
Edwards is somebody who knows the cyber attacks being lobbed at America's critical infrastructure.
This room looks a lot like Enemy of the State or something.
So what you're in the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, which is more or less the DHS Operations Center for cyber. These are where all the different analysts from ICS CERT, US CERT are actively defending the country's networks.
In 2015 alone, the Department of Homeland Security spent $1.25 billion on cybersecurity.
We've cleaned up the place a little bit for you to come in, but it's definitely a very highly active environment all the time.
Edwards has declassified the control room, so we won't see any real-time threats, but it still gives us a rare look into their nationwide monitoring system.
how does ICS CERT protect the United States?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's a big problem. If there is an incident, either criminal or nation state level, we'll send an incident response team to those companies to work hand in hand with them to clean up, mitigate the event.
Do you see an awful lot of nation state actors going after critical infrastructure?
I would say we see the whole spectrum. They all look different, and we save the word attack for something that is purposeful and intentional with an intentional consequence. A lot of what we see is sort of reconnaissance. And then, of course, yes, we do see the nation-state level actors either in the espionage business or prepping the battlefield type of perspective, right? So you're trying to understand the infrastructure for some future unknown use.
So if most threats Homeland Security see are about espionage, at what point does a cyber attack cross the line?
At what point does the administration consider a critical infrastructure attack an act of war?
So that is not something that is well defined. Fortunately, we haven't seen one of those events here in the United States in a way that would probably cross that threshold. And so, therefore, I think that we focus on really raising the level of cybersecurity in our critical infrastructure. It's one of the areas that we've worked very hard on over the course of this administration.
Even as the U.S. tries to shore up its cyber defenses, there's little incentive not to attack.
Mutually assured destruction is another way of describing deterrence. If you attack me, I will fight back, and therefore it's not in your interest to attack me in the first place. And that's where the difficulty of proving who actually launched an attack becomes a major issue. Because it's very rare for a nation state or a criminal group to go directly from the server it controls at the target. They will often launch from around the world. They may hop multiple points. They may enlist computers that they've hijacked as being the spears, basically, that they throw at the target.
I mean, you're painting a pretty dark picture then.
When you get attacked, even if it's major infrastructure, the first question is, how sure am I that I know the country that either caused it or allowed it to happen? And that ambiguity and that uncertainty is one of the obstacles to having a very clear deterrent policy.
Experts and hackers agree that a new war on critical infrastructure has not only begun, it's well underway. It all started on November 21st, 2014, when Sony executives got an extortion email from an unknown group, the so-called God's Apostles. Sony reported it to the FBI. But 3 days later, all hell broke loose when a group calling themselves the Guardians of Peace appeared on Sony computers. Sony Pictures co-chairs Amy Pascal and Michael Linton scrambled to contain the damage, but it was too late. Over the next 3 weeks, a mountain of data, including movies, salaries, and private corporate information, was dumped onto the internet. But what really captured everyone's imagination were the private emails of Sony top dogs.
Everybody is suddenly reading Amy Pascal's personal emails and professional emails, which were also, in many instances, very embarrassing.
As the editor-at-large of The Hollywood Reporter, Kim Masters remembers the cringe across Tinseltown.
There was a sense of instant fear throughout Hollywood because everybody knew, first of all, that they were probably vulnerable. I think simultaneously, a lot of executives in the industry thought, yeah, but I don't know if I'd put some of this stuff in an email.
Producer Scott Rudin called out Angelina Jolie for being a spoiled brat. Sony exec Clint Culpepper badmouthed Kevin Hart. Worst of all, Pascal and Rudin gossiped about what flicks the first black president of the United States might be into.
It was so extreme and so emotional and sometimes, in some cases, so inappropriate.
But the breach went beyond salacious emails. Sony employees watched helplessly as their social security numbers, medical records, and more were released online for everyone to see. I met someone who was on Sony's lot the day the attack went down. She was a senior coordinator for the studio's digital TV department and eventually quit because of the hack. Selena was the only Sony employee I spoke to who was willing to go on camera.
When did you find out your personal information was actually leaked, though?
We got a memo saying that unfortunately a cyber hack attack happened and they got everybody's information. But they didn't specify who. They just basically anybody that ever worked for Sony at any time in their lifetime possibly had a chance of their stuff being hacked.
So if you could just break down specifically how you went about finding your name and finding out that you were, personally affected by it.
I literally went to Google and searched Sony Hack 2014, and then I saw just like a tree directory, like old school style DOS, and you saw just different file names, and they named the files like Selena's offer letter, and like they were named like specifically what that document was, so it wasn't hard to find out your information was put out there.
What were some of the things that were going down? Because obviously you can't use computers. That's everything. Did everything just revert to the Stone Age? What happened?
We started saying we're working analog. You literally had to write stuff out. But yeah, there was a lot of drinking and partying and eating, and because that's all you could do. And I mean, Sony already paid for their Christmas party, so we had it, and it was huge and it was awesome. And then Michael Linton and Amy Pascal stood up and gave a speech, and then Amy Pascal kind of challenged the hackers.
Challenged the hackers?
Yeah,
How?
in her speech, she was like, oh, this wasn't gonna get us down, we're gonna beat you guys and all that stuff.
Pascal's defiance didn't save her, and she was eventually forced to resign. But from early on, the real question everyone asked was, why would hackers target Sony Pictures? The media had an answer.
You want us to kill the leader of North Korea?
Yes.
A movie starring Seth Rogen and James Franco with a plot hinging on assassinating the real-life leader of North Korea.
President Kim Jong-un.
The interview was, was just a raunchy stoner comedy. I don't think anybody would argue it was high art or an Oscar material.
With the interview set for Christmas release, a rambling message posted online threatened terrorist attacks on the movie's premiere and any theaters daring to screen the film. Sony Pictures pulled the movie.
We had no alternative but to not proceed with the theatrical release on the 25th of December.
And then, out of nowhere, President Obama named the perp.
The FBI announced today that, and we can confirm that North Korea engaged in this attack.
It was the first time a president has blamed a nation state for a major cyber attack on American soil. The US retaliated with sanctions. The White House didn't discuss the evidence, but the FBI came forward with some details. Brett Leatherman is an agent in the FBI's cyber division. Based on what's publicly known, the hack seems to have gone down in 4 phases. First, spear phishing, which the FBI said was likely how the hackers got into Sony.
Somebody within a company or organization will receive an email that looks like it's a legitimate email that might contain an attachment or a link to a website. Once you click on that link, it would take you then to a website, or it would launch malware on your computer that would allow somebody to then compromise your system.
Next, the hackers gained broader access to Sony's networks.
So they're looking for a user with escalated privileges, and it could be an admin, or it could be a CEO or CFO who needs access to your network in an administrative capacity. So admin credentials are key in going laterally through a network.
With their almost godlike access to Sony, the hackers moved to phase 3, data theft. It probably took them months to steal everything they eventually released online. And then came the grand finale, data destruction.
The unique thing about the Sony attack was the destructive nature of the malware.
The hackers launched malware, or malicious software, that destroyed Sony computers from within, wiping data off its systems. But that still doesn't explain how the government attributed the attack to North Korea. Whoever hacked Sony Pictures networks stole sensitive data, then smashed whatever they could on the way out. But to this day, one question remains. How is the US government so sure it was North Korea?
So I can't comment on ongoing FBI investigations.
So why is the investigation ongoing?
A cyber investigation is a long-term effort to just not only attribute, if there's a particular country involved, not just attribute who that country might be, but also to attribute threat actors behind the actual compromise, because there's other groups that are involved in these kind of attacks. So there are other groups who kind of jump on the bandwagon for their own benefit.
And that was the case with Sony?
Possibly. That may have been the case with Sony, but in general, I think we frequently see that with major cyber events.
Beyond the FBI, the National Security Agency, one of America's spy powers, was reported to have evidence it was North Korea. But the NSA won't confirm or deny anything.
Well, actually, I think the government was more forthcoming in the Sony hack than is usually the case. You know, historically, the government wouldn't really attribute it all to a nation state.
Michael Chertoff was the Secretary of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush. He and former NSA and CIA Director Michael Hayden now run a private consulting firm.
And then you had the government pretty clearly saying North Korea was responsible for the Sony hack. And I think that was a decision that the risk of revealing a little bit about sources and methods was outweighed by the importance of saying to the bad actors, we know it's you, and there's a limit to our willingness to tolerate this.
So in your expert opinion, do you think that was a good decision?
I think it probably did make sense. I think if you look at actually the way North Korea operates, there is a small group of privileged individuals, which include people who have technical skills that are useful to the regime, that are well-resourced and are quite capable. I mean, they may not be the A team, but they're the B team, and the B team can do a lot of damage.
I had an idea who Chertoff's B team could be. A North Korean military agency known as Bureau 121. But North Korea can barely keep the lights on, so could they really have an elite hacking unit?
Martin?
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Sounds like you're trying to access some aliens or something.
Almost. North Korea.
Almost.
Martin Williams is a reporter who's been to North Korea and has written extensively on their tech capabilities.
What do we know about Bureau 121, the actual hacking collective of the cyber warriors of Kim Jong-un? Like, what do we know about them? Because nobody seems to know anything, like who they are, what they do.
I mean, welcome to the world of looking at North Korea. Nobody knows anything about anything in the country. Very little information gets out, except what you can hear on the radio. There are snippets that come out through defectors. It seems that what they're doing is taking the kids that are really good at science and really good at mathematics from high school, putting them into good universities, and then after universities training them. Some of that training apparently takes place in Pyongyang. A lot of it we see taking place overseas.
We've heard that hacking and hackers are obviously a new focus. Why do you think that is?
It's much cheaper. A room full of hackers is way cheaper than jet aircraft or keeping tanks in operation or submarines or things like that. So if they can start being a power on the internet, then it's a cheap way of projecting their power across the world.
I wondered what Bureau 121, the Hermit Kingdom's military hacking unit, is really like. So with the help of an interpreter, I made contact with the defector who claims he was a North Korean Army lieutenant. Jung Se-yul defected to South Korea almost a decade ago, but still keeps tabs on old friends.
You were working with and you were training with hackers.
군 생활하시는 동안 다른 해킹을 하시는 분들도 계셨겠네요?
네, 그렇죠.
Do you know anyone in Bureau 121? And are you in contact with them?
네, 동명이 있고요. 그런데 소개는 못 해드리겠습니다. 사이버는 정말 누구인지도 모르게 적국의 숨통을 겨룰 수 있는 그런 최선의 비밀 전쟁과 같다고 얘기를 했거든요. 그래서 참 그때 어떤 적국이 동명이 이제 북한일 것이라 하고 확정을 해도 자기네가 발뺌을 할 수 있는 게 바로 그런 이제 사이버 전쟁이라는 그런 특성과도 이제 밀접히 연관이 되어 있겠죠.
What's the worst thing that North Korea could do to the U.S. in the cyber realm?
그러니까 이제 북한의 이제 사이버 전의 그런 이제 전략적인 목표, 그러니까 최종의 목표는 일단은 정면전에 대처를 해서 적국을 무너뜨리는 겁니다. 그래서 지금 현재 그런 소니 회사라든가 이런 이제 사이버 테러들은 실제 북한의 이런 전략적인 목표, 최후의 어떤 목표를 가리기 위한 그런 눈가림일 수도 있고.
Mr. Jung said the Sony hack might be a sign North Korea is preparing for war. But as I dug into the case, I discovered that many highly regarded hackers and security experts doubt North Korea was behind the attack at all. Just weeks after Sony Pictures was hacked, the FBI released vague evidence pointing to North Korea. But hackers and computer experts almost immediately poked holes in the FBI's case.
Do I think the North Koreans started it?
No, I don't think so.
One of the most vocal doubters is Mark Rogers, a malware expert and self-described former black hat hacker.
First of all, the agenda changed substantially at several points throughout the hack. That kind of implies multiple different actors to me. They started out trying to extort money. I can't see any reason why North Korean hackers would try and do that. Then they had a kind of a ramble about unemployment and job losses in Sony. I don't see how that benefits the North Korean regime. I think they were attacked by an opportunist, and then I think that evolved. You ended up with other groups piling in and exploiting it. And then as the media started to suggest maybe a potential link between this hack and the interview, I think the hackers latched onto that and they ran with it because it was both a convenient cover for them and, well, you know, a lot of hackers like to do things for amusement, for the lols, as they say. That's probably what brought North Korea in, and it was much later on, I think, that North Korea actually was involved, if they were at all.
If Mark was right, his theory fit what the FBI had hinted. Sony might have been the victim of a hacking party. But who could have been involved? In 2011, the notorious hacktivist collective Anonymous attacked Sony websites. They said they were defending George Hotz, aka GeoHot, the first guy to jailbreak an iPhone when he was just 17.
This is the world's first unlocked iPhone.
George? A few years later, he jailbroke a PlayStation 3. That didn't sit well with Sony.
Yo, it's GeoHot! And for those that don't know, I'm getting sued by Sony. Let's take us out of the court.
Hi, Sony. How are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. You know, suing me was kind of dick, but it all worked out in the end, so yeah. That's what I think of Sony. The main reason that I got into the iPhone and PlayStation, it was a cool puzzle. These companies are spending millions of dollars to build really cool puzzles for me, and it's real. This isn't some puzzle constructed by somebody to solve. This is a puzzle constructed by somebody to not solve, and that's why it was so alluring. That's why it still is.
We are anonymous.
Sony's lawsuit against George made a lot of hackers angry, including Anonymous.
We do not forget.
They launched a denial of service attack, sending so much traffic to Sony's websites, they crashed.
Expected us.
And then someone hacked into the PlayStation Network itself, gaining access to the credit card information of 77 million users. Sony was forced to apologize, but no one has ever been formally accused of the breach.
It wasn't even about the breach, right? Companies get breached all the time. It was really about how Sony responded to it. Sony responded by taking the PlayStation Network offline, and it was down for a month. So now you have 77 million people who are trying to play Call of Duty and being like, what's going on here, man, right? So do I think that the lawsuit and what happened with me made them a target? Probably not. Do I think that what happened in the fallout with Anonymous and them taking the network offline for? Maybe. You know, that's more plausible.
The PlayStation saga isn't the only event that might have pissed hackers off. In 2005, security experts found suspicious software on CDs produced by Sony BMG, the company's music division. I went to see Dan Kaminsky, a legend among hackers. He's famous for finding and helping fix a major flaw in the internet's backbone. He also played a pivotal role in uncovering the BMG fiasco.
So if you took that disk that was just supposed to be music, it would install a little program on your computer. And that program did two things. First, it made it so your computer could no longer copy music. And second, it hid. Because it was pretty sure that this was not what the user wanted. And so once it was in, it sure didn't want the user to hit the uninstall button. And somebody figured out, hey, wait a second, what is this software on? This was supposed to be an audio CD. They looked at it and like, this is malware. What is Sony doing putting out custom malware on CDs? So what I did was a trick called DNS cache snooping. I do this scan, and like 500,000 networks had seen this thing. And so I took that information, got flown out to Sony BMG headquarters, and I'm like, hey guys, so here's what you did, and here's it all over the world.
Is it that kind of behavior, though, that has made them a target?
It certainly didn't make them any friends.
Given Sony's history as a major hacking target, did North Korea really attack Sony Pictures, or was it just a freelance hacker? Some of the smartest hackers in America were telling me they didn't believe North Korea attacked Sony, and that a lot of people might have had the motive to do it. But Kurt Baumgartner thinks North Korea really is to blame. Kurt analyzes malicious code and comes up with defensive solutions for one of the world's biggest security companies. He showed me how the Sony hack bears a striking resemblance to Dark Soul, a 2013 cyber attack on South Korean banks, which was widely blamed on North Korea.
So what we've got here are two different HTML pages that are basically threats from the attackers. So on one side, this is the 2013 Dark Soul attack and the audio from their video. And then over here we have basically the Sony hack.
It's really sophisticated. It does seem like the graphic arts team of Hermit Nation.
It's pretty low tech.
There are other similarities between Dark Soul and the Sony hack. The word security is actually misspelled in the exact same way in the code used in both attacks.
In this case, it was pretty clear to us that the same shared code base has been used in both events.
And both the Sony and Dark Soul attacks were wiper events. They wiped or destroyed data from their victims' systems.
These types of attacks are extremely rare. They just don't happen. There might be 5 major wiper attacks that I know of.
But the skeptics say the similarities Kurt showed me don't actually add up.
When we talk about the similarities here, Dark Soul, that was attributed to a group of South Korean hackers, which they called the Dark Soul Gang, and was never formally linked to North Korea. The reality is it boils down to just a few fragments of code in each of the pieces of malware.
It's not nothing that the software is related. It's just not wildly compelling.
It's not a smoking gun.
It's not even a warm gun. It's barely a gun.
It's a
tube-shaped object.
Malware has a history of being shared. And once that code gets out there, you will end up with multiple variants that all have the same parentage. They all look very similar, but they're being run by different people.
The malware's code did contain IP addresses, which indicate a computer's location. The FBI says they were linked to North Korea, but that's not conclusive either.
Could you fake your IP being in North Korea?
Break into a machine in North Korea. Break into a machine in Russia. Breaking into a machine in North Korea. Break into a machine in China. Breaking into Russia. Breaking into North Korea. These are all things you totally can do. Bouncing around the world happens in milliseconds. And so people ask, is it North Korea that did this? This is a thing that 4 people could do. 4 out of 7 billion. This isn't an attack that requires nation-state intent. It's an attack that requires a couple of guys being bored.
My sources were telling me that the attack on Sony Pictures wasn't even that sophisticated. So maybe the company should have had better security.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether the hackers came from North Korea or North Dakota. What matters is that Sony could see this attack coming, and it didn't do enough to prepare for it.
Matthew Prush is an attorney who represented Sony employees in a class action lawsuit against the studio.
Sony just didn't do what a reasonable company should have done to protect the private information on its system. It should have been stored in a way that was encrypted and that was segregated from other information, so it was much harder for the hackers to find.
Sony Pictures declined to comment on these allegations and settled the lawsuit out of court. But it's undeniable that employees' private and exploitable data will live online forever.
Have you ever received an apology from Sony?
No. They kind of made you feel like it was your fault that you weren't protecting yourself already to begin with. So, I mean, I didn't do anything wrong but show up to do my job, thinking this corporation knew exactly what they were doing, and then finding out that they don't is it's really frustrating. I mean, it sucks that we're collateral damage, but I mean, that's how war is, and so this is basically what it is. It's like a nerd war now.
As the dust settled, the Sony hack claimed the job of an executive, and a stoner flick lost its Christmas release. But the real victims are Sony's employees. Whether it was North Koreans or bored hackers, all the competing theories about who did it prove one thing. Definitively attributing a cyber attack can be almost impossible. And in a world where it's not only easy to hack a corporation, but easy to hide, all of us are vulnerable.
You have a prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. This call is from
Jeremy Hammond,
an inmate at a federal prison. This call is being...
I'm calling Jeremy Hammond, a legendary anonymous hacker. Hammond is serving a 10-year prison sentence for hacking a private intelligence firm.
Yo, what up, how you doing?
Jeremy, how you doing? It's Ben.
It's all good. Early morning, drinking coffee. Okay, well look, they literally just called me to the lieutenant's office about 2 seconds ago. So, and the guy's standing right next to me right now, so I can't finish this call. Yeah, I guess I can't finish this call.
You can't finish this call?
Yeah, I guess I gotta go.
You gotta go?
I'll call you again later.
Okay, are you gonna call back?
I'm gonna try, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks, man. Good luck. Well, that was bullshit.
Greetings, citizens of the world. Hello. Congress of the United States. Hello. Leaders of Scientology.
Anonymous. It's a brand, a meme, and a movement.
We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
For almost a decade, they've hacked into corporations, stolen private information, and shut down websites. Their signature is instantly recognizable. The Guy Fawkes mask from the movie V for Vendetta, which was based on the graphic novel series of the same name. The real Guy Fawkes was executed in 1606 for conspiring to kill the king and blow up the British Parliament. I went to talk with Gabriella Coleman, an anthropologist who wrote the definitive book on Anonymous. Full disclosure, she's also a consultant on this show.
They're ghostly, they're spectral, they're mysterious, they're controversial, they're radical. It's a protest movement. It's not about long-term structural change. It's about getting people excited for activism, which is incredibly important. And then I think their most kind of constructive contribution has to do with the leaking of information, whistleblowing.
But that's not how Anonymous started out. Back in the early 2000s, a group of trolls banded together on a web forum called 4chan, taking their name from the default ID many used to post, Anonymous.
Anonymous was never meant to become an activist phenomena. Today it's identified with politics, with activism, but its roots are in the offensive, sometimes terrifying, sometimes humorous world of internet trolling.
Trolling is the time-honored practice of online baiting, and in 2008, Anonymous found an easy target. It started with a video featuring the world's most famous Scientologist, a very enthusiastic Tom Cruise. The Church of Scientology was trying to get this video, apparently leaked by a church insider, off the internet.
And the Church of Scientology threatened all sorts of publishers like Gawker with lawsuits if they didn't take down the video. And it was at this moment that Anonymous decides to target the Church of Scientology with one of these trolling campaigns. And in this case, it was, I like to refer to it as the mothership trolling campaign that Anonymous engaged in. They prank called a Scientology Dianetics hotline. They sent hundreds of pizzas to churches across North America. They sent black faxes to all the churches.
Then, Anonymous hit Scientology websites with what's called a distributed denial of service, or DDoS. A DDoS attack floods a website with so much traffic that it crashes. When the attack stops, the site can come back up without any permanent damage.
And it was during the course of that campaign that they also then started to debate whether they should kind of earnestly protest the Church of Scientology, not for the sake of trolling, but for the kind of sake of, activism.
For the first time, Anonymous was considering real political action. And then came a fateful step. The collective called for a worldwide street protest against Scientology, and thousands actually showed up. Anonymous's next big op was just as political. It morphed from an anti-copyright movement into a massive campaign to defend WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange. In November 2010, WikiLeaks began publishing a trove of leaked diplomatic cables, classified dispatches between American embassies and the State Department. Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal stopped processing donations to WikiLeaks. Anonymous struck back with what they called a payback.
That operation was, and I still think is, the largest protest DDoS that the internet has ever seen. You had over 7,000 people that showed up on the chat channel where activity was organized. It was monumental DDoS, multi-day against Visa, PayPal, MasterCard.
Op Payback put Anonymous on the world stage and put them on the FBI's radar. As the Bureau's top official in cybercrime, Sean Henry watched Anonymous rise. He retired in 2012.
What was it like when you first encountered Anonymous?
Anonymous, I mean, just the very name, right? Who is it that we're trying to investigate? Where do they reside? Who do they associate with? This is a group that's been widely dispersed around the country and has been pretty good about keeping themselves off the grid as individuals.
What about what they actually do? Because a lot of it's just like a DDoS attack. Is that really all that bad?
We're seeing a new form of social protest, and that is people taking advantage of their technical skills to object in a loud sort of way to social and political practices that they deem objectionable. I mean, a lot of that activity is illegal under our existing law, and there are authorized ways that people can protest using the network to disrupt organizations or to breach data and to steal it is not one of those ways.
By 2011, Anonymous had gone from a fringe group of trolls to a global political force. The collective attacked the websites of repressive governments to support the Arab Spring, took to the streets as part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and hacked corporations and law enforcement along the way. But to understand who Anonymous is now, I had to meet some of them in person. Anonymous is basically a network of online trolls that became a global force to be reckoned with. They usually organize on a network of online chat channels called IRC, using aliases. But that doesn't mean they never meet in person. And Chaos Communication Camp, a hacker gathering that only happens once every 4 years, turned out to be a bit of a reunion party. Some of the people I met have never been interviewed on camera before.
My name is Mercedes Hafer, and I have 2 state national bowling championships.
I'm Keith. I'm the pretty PayPal 14 defendant.
And I'm Panda, and I'm the king of Sweden.
No, Keth, and Anon Panda took part in Anonymous's legendary attack against PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard in support of WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange.
I mean, I don't like him as a person, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have rights, and that doesn't mean that I won't fight for his rights, because if he doesn't have rights, then I don't have rights. Everybody has them, or they're just privileges. So if I want to be able to publish secret government data that everyone should know, then I also have to defend Assange.
But some within Anonymous weren't as interested in politics as they were in lulz, internet slang for hilarity. And lulsec was a small breakaway group of Anonymous members who just wanted some lulz at the system's expense.
Quite frankly, hackers get bored, and there's nothing more dangerous than a bored hacker, because they'll make themselves not bored very quickly.
Darren Martin took part in both Anonymous and lulsec, going by the name Pwn Sauce. Pwning something can mean that you've hacked it completely.
When it all really started kicking off, the lulsec thing was just when I was turning 19. So pretty much same as most of the people involved, we were all kids basically. So we just kind of split it off and did our own thing. And then, well, you know, just kind of took on a life of its own.
Who were some of lulsec's targets, and why did you guys decide on them?
So lulsec motto was sort of laughing at security. So we sort of picked targets based on who would be funny to hack. And, you know, corporations are pretty funny to hack, because who wouldn't want to see like a big corporation brought to its needs?
Tiflo was a respected Anonymous member and a talented hacker. He was also part of lulsec, all at the age of 16. In the summer of 2011, lulsec went on a hacking spree. They DDoSed the websites of the CIA and the Senate, hacked an FBI association called InfraGard, and published a fake story on PBS NewsHour's site. They also redirected the UK newspaper, The Sun, to a fake obituary for its owner.
None of these targets were particularly difficult to hack. A 3-year-old could do it. I mean, Senate.gov was one of the simplest hacks ever pulled off. It was like the 90s called, it wants its security vulnerabilities back.
In many cases, people think it was deserved because of their previous actions. For example, The Sun. The Sun was involved in a news hacking scandal where they were hacking into celebrities' phones. So when the Sun was hacked, it was, a lot of people sort of found that funny.
Well, it just seems like justice, like you said.
Yeah.
If they're hacking, then why not let us hack them?
Yeah, it's sort of like justice porn, in a way.
Both LulzSec and Anonymous needed servers to organize online. And since corporate servers would just shut them down or turn them over to the police, the collective built its own network. That's where Chris Weatherhead came in. He helped establish AnonOps, the collective's main network of chat rooms.
So you ran the servers that Anonymous used for their operations?
Yeah, so I ran servers that they used for a few of their operations, probably most notably the ones relating to Operation Payback, the Operation Avenge Assange, stuff in the Arab Spring, like the Operation Tunisia, helping the Tunisian people, Operation Egypt, helping people get back online when Mubarak cut them off.
Did you develop pretty close friendships with certain people?
None of us knew who anyone else really was. So there's a sort of a crossover between friendship and trust. You reach a point where you're implicitly trusting people with information, and therefore you are essentially befriending them because you only trust your friends.
Trust was important since all of this was illegal and the heat was on. In 2011, law enforcement around the world located and arrested several members of LulzSec and Anonymous, laying dozens of charges for their high-profile hacks.
So when the police turned up at my house, it was a highly unpleasant experience. They kind of gave it the whole TV treatment, I guess you could call it. They sent in the whole, lots of people shouting really loudly with, firearms and shit. I guess they were afraid that laptops were wired to explode or some crazy shit like that. Or that, I'd have a delete button which would make all the evidence disappear or something.
Police broke down the front door, came in, arrested me in my bed, handcuffed me in my bed. They all seemed so surprised that my computer and everything around it was off. Of course it's off, it's 7 in the morning. What do you expect?
And me personally, I was just arrested because
you're so pretty. It's because you're so pretty.
No and Keth were arrested, but narrowly avoided doing major time. Tiflo was too young to go to prison, Pone Sauce got off with a fine, and Chris spent 4.5 months behind bars. But there were much harsher sentences to come. Anonymous was on a roll. That is, until a series of arrests in 2011 and 2012. But for members of the collective, there was more shocking news to come. Many of the arrests were made possible by an informant. Hector Xavier Monsegur, otherwise known as Sabu, was a vocal member of Anonymous and LulzSec. Many considered him a friend.
You met Sabu. What was that like? And what was he like?
Sabu is such an interesting character. He was really involved in Anonymous. He was very charismatic. His personality online was larger than life. It was why he was so effective as an informant. Some of his peers and colleagues, described him as legend.
Why do you think he ratted out his friends and his peers?
Sabu was put in a difficult situation. When the FBI showed up at his house, they basically said, look, work for us or we will take your foster kids away from you and away from your family entirely. And he took the deal that was given to him and started almost immediately to work for the FBI.
Sabu not only led the FBI to LulzSec, but to one of Anonymous's most brilliant hackers, 27-year-old named Jeremy Hammond. Hammond was the real deal, a radical anarchist as active in the streets as he was online, a hacktivist way before Anonymous was even a thing.
And we believe that the internet is a powerful new medium where just a handful of people in small groups, just by shifting data around in the right directions, can make big changes and big damage. Any method of disruption at any cost, any means necessary.
Hammond helped launch Op Antisec, which targeted police departments and what he calls the national security complex. Sabu was also a major player in Antisec, all while working for the FBI. With the feds watching his every move, Sabu introduced Hammond to a hacker who had found a way into Stratfor, a massive global intelligence firm. Hammond then hacked Stratfor, stealing thousands of credit card numbers and millions of emails. He was arrested for the hack and is now serving a 10-year sentence in federal prison.
Dial 5 now. If you
Yo, what's up?
Yo, what's going on? You okay?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's cool.
I'll get right to it. Why'd you hack Stratfor?
Well, Stratfor was a private intelligence corporation. They're mercenaries. They're kind of like the antithesis of, the Black Hats, right? The revolutionaries. People who use their skill for social justice. They use it for pay to control and monitor and basically dominate the world. So it was a kind of a natural target.
Why don't you tell me about Sabu? What was his role in all this?
Well, basically, he was an internet loudmouth more than anything. He was around, during the, time with Anonymous and LulzSec and so forth. And so then they came in and busted him, and then he flipped, and he started working for the feds.
How'd that make you feel?
Well, it's dishonest, it's betrayal. He chose to side with the enemy, the feds, the white hats, the NSAs of the world, to not only turn over his friends that he was working with, but he also sabotaged the movement at the time. The people that he was working with, were now under monitoring. I mean, he basically got a bunch of kids arrested. And, if Sabu would have held his ground, I think we would have continued on. We would have been more effective. I certainly wouldn't have been busted if it weren't for Sabu's cooperation.
I asked Sabu to tell his side of the story, but he declined to talk to me on the record. After Hammond hacked Stratfor, he leaked the company's emails to WikiLeaks. The emails revealed Stratfor had monitored activists worldwide.
WikiLeaks begins its release of 5,000 emails documenting the private lives and private lies of private spies.
But one question still remains. This whole time, the FBI had an informant. So why did it let Stratfor get hacked?
The FBI could have done something about that. They could have prevented all this damage from happening. But no, they were more interested in trapping people and, ensnaring people and doing things. While they could have stopped things and done crime prevention, instead they thought, we're going to entrap everyone. I mean, they completely burned Stratfor. And that, the FBI need to have a good look at themselves and go, what moral high horse do we have to stand on when we're using other people as bait?
After the high-profile arrests of some of its core members, Anonymous was at a crossroads. But that made some of its hackers more determined than ever. Sabu's betrayal broke trust within Anonymous. Anyone could be an informant. And security expert Robert Hansen believes the group has been infiltrated.
I know that there are certain governments who have a keen interest in not only infiltrating them, but flipping people inside Anonymous and turning them against one another.
And you're saying that signals intelligence agencies around the world will try to compromise Anonymous?
Yes.
Which ones in particular?
At this point, most of them. Yeah. I've actually sat in meetings where people have actively talked about doing that, and not as a we could, as in we are.
So Anonymous is essentially as clean as a public swimming pool.
I don't know if I put it that way. But what I do know is that it would be too dangerous for a guy like me to ever consider being involved with at this point. If I were part of Anonymous right now, I would burn everything and walk away, and I would never look back.
But for some, walking away isn't an option. Despite the risks, Anonymous DDoS actions and hacks continue across the globe.
What do you say to people that say Anonymous is flaming out?
It's never going to happen.
Why not?
Anonymous as a whole will always exist. It's an idea. You can't kill or jail it.
Bio could go to jail if his identity is revealed. He took part in DDoS attacks on Canadian government websites, protesting an anti-terrorism bill known as C-51. The legislation gives the government broader surveillance powers, sparking concerns about privacy abuse.
Are you going to escalate your attacks in Canada? Are you going to go after more stuff?
That really depends on where the government goes with this bill. It needs to be repealed. You could be detained indefinitely if you are proclaimed a terrorist. Like myself, for example, I could probably be held indefinitely.
As a terrorist?
As a terrorist, because I poked a website a few times. And that's about all the damage it does, right? Getting poked.
Right.
We stop, it comes back online. Whoop-de.
If you put your chances of going to jail in a percentage, what would it be?
At this point, pretty high. And when we set out to do this in the first place with cyber privacy, we knew it would end one of two ways. Us in prison, or we'd win. That's that, really. We're not backing down, they're not backing down.
When you arrest someone, that doesn't scare them away from it, at least within Anonymous. It just sort of makes them more motivated and sort of more passionate and more angry.
If you could go back and do it all again, would you?
Would I have had those ideals? Probably. Would I have got involved with Anonymous? Probably. Would I have ended up running servers? Highly likely. Therefore, would I still be in the situation I am now? Very likely.
How does this end personally for you?
Personally, this doesn't end. This is my life's work at this point. And this ends if they lock me up forever. Other than that, I don't think I'll ever stop.
At its best, Anonymous has embarrassed those in power, taunting them, paralyzing them, and spilling their secrets online. As much an idea as a collective, concerted campaigns by law enforcement could weaken and demoralize, but not destroy it. And so, Anonymous lives on.
All my comrades still out there in the struggle, keep doing your thing. It brings me great joy to hear about big shot corporations and government systems being hacked, having all their details exposed to the world.
Thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
There it is, man.
Take it easy.
The National Security Agency is one of the world's largest intelligence agencies. Headquartered in Fort Meade, Maryland, the NSA's mandate is to collect foreign intelligence. After 9/11, George W. Bush authorized the NSA to collect even more, including American communications to and from foreign targets.
Good morning. This is a highly classified program that is crucial to our national security.
This program shocked an NSA senior executive named Thomas Drake. Drake is a decorated veteran who blew the whistle on NSA's activities to the press. He barely escaped 35 years in jail after being charged under the Espionage Act, a law first written in 1917.
Mr. Drake.
Hi.
Ben.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
The National Security Agency is focused on foreign intelligence. It was formed in 1952. People don't realize it was not formed by an act of Congress. It was literally signed into existence by the stroke of a secret presidential pen. In fact, the joke was, it was no such agency or never say anything. You never even referenced the actual name. People who used to work there, oh, I work at DOD. Now I accelerate forward. Internet explodes. You have this rapid transition from analog to digital, and the explosion of data became exponential. What do you think is the easiest way to deal with it? Just suck it all.
So what happened after 9/11? Was it NSA should do better?
Here's where you have culture and secret meeting itself, realizing it failed but can't admit it failed. It had not prevented the next Pearl Harbor. And now NSA is literally unleashed. It's unleashed on an extraordinary scale, a scale we have never seen in US history or the world. All means necessary to confront the threat. Who cares about the Constitution? Who cares about law? Who cares about the rights of US persons? Hey, if you've done nothing wrong, I even heard this, then it should matter. And the mantra was, just get the data. Collect it all so we can know it all. Collect it all so we can know it all.
Drake inspired another NSA worker to sound the alarm.
This afternoon, the Guardian newspapers revealed the name of their source.
In 2013, Edward Snowden leaked tens of thousands of classified NSA documents. The first to get published was a secret court order forcing Verizon to fork over the call data of millions of US customers. The next big leak was a PowerPoint presentation about a program called PRISM. The NSA boasted that PRISM gave them direct access to emails, video chats, and more from some of America's biggest tech companies. The media was obsessed with Snowden and the leaks, but few people noticed information hidden in the documents about a top secret NSA unit called TAO, or Tailored Access Operations, until the German magazine Der Spiegel revealed more about it than ever before. Jörg Schindler is the magazine's award-winning national security reporter.
Yeah, you can call them the highly skilled plumbers of the NSA who are able to get into every sort of pipe. What they are doing is getting the ungettable.
They're like the special forces of the NSA, essentially.
Yeah, a special hacker force. I mean, the whole NSA is a special force, but those are the highly skilled handymen who create certain kind of tools to infiltrate, manipulate, and sabotage every kind of digital device you might think of.
What's the relationship between tailored access operations by the NSA and their mass surveillance?
I mean, to explain it easily, I would say that mass surveillance is like going into the ocean with a huge fishing net and to draw everything out with whatever you find. And what the tailored access operation units are doing is like using the harpoon to find special targets and the fishes they really need. So that might be the difference. So that it's like going hand in hand.
And TA is pretty good at it.
They're extremely good at it, yes.
The Snowden leaks revealed more about tailored access operations, but a lot is still unknown. I wanted to talk to someone who knows the NSA from the inside, an Air Force veteran and former NSA exec named John Harbaugh.
I'm
John Harbaugh.
Nice to meet you, John.
Please come in.
Let's see this place. Route 9B.
Yeah.
Why that name, by the way?
So root is system level access. 9B is hexadecimal for 9/11. So it's a nod to the fact that the next 9/11 event is most likely going to be cyber related.
Route 9B, which has defense contracts, aims to hunt and pursue adversaries inside a client's network.
This is where we do all of our hunt operations, what we call it, for our clients. So what this is showing you is what the operator sees while they're doing their op, right? So there'll be windows of time where they're actually active inside the client's network, pursuing the adversary. And this was really driven by our experiences in the government space.
Does it look like this in Fort Meade?
This is better.
In your bio, it says something like you were the director of a super elite cyber operation unit.
Yeah, so basically what that's about is what we've tried to recreate here. So my time inside the organization, I had the pleasure and the fortune to be asked to run a team of about 8 individuals. And that team was focused on the most challenging problems in cyber.
Was that tailored access operations?
So you know, there is elements of that space, right? Because if you're in cyber and you do all of cyber, then you're doing all of those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bosses could come in and say, we have a significant national event. I need you guys to be able to do this in the next 12 hours. I could walk into that space and say, hey guys, I need 5 minutes. I would give them what we would call the op order. This is what we need to achieve. We need to achieve it in the next 12, 24, 48 hours. And I could walk away. And I knew when I came back, no matter what time of day, how long they were working on it, they would get it done. And it was that kind of teamwork that really drew people. And it's a very similar thing to the special ops community.
And it does sound like a military chain of command.
Yeah, I mean, NSA is a very military organization.
To build a team like TAO, the NSA has to hire highly skilled hackers. So how does it headhunt them? To find out, I asked Chris Segoyan. He's a privacy activist with the American Civil Liberties Union.
Who are they? And where's the NSA recruiting them from?
The government wants people who can get a security clearance, more so than ever. Particularly, after Snowden and after Chelsea Manning, they want people who they know are going to play by the rules. They want people who cannot easily be blackmailed. So I think NSA tries to recruit the best and brightest from computer science programs around the country, and in particular, computer security programs like Carnegie Mellon that have probably the most sophisticated offensive cybersecurity programs in academia in the United States, and their students are heavily recruited both by NSA but also by Silicon Valley.
They're competing for the same people.
So they're competing for the same people, and the problem that NSA has is they can't pay the same kind of money. Right? They're not going to be able to offer the smoothies and massages and sort of perks of life that Google and Facebook can, but they have something that those companies don't. What they have is a monopoly on violence. Right? In the same way that if you want to rappel out of helicopters and shoot people in the head, you go join the special forces. If you want to hack into systems lawfully, the only game in town is the government. And in many other walks of life, you would be a criminal, you would be a stalker, you'd be a bad person. But when you go to NSA, suddenly you get to wrap yourself in the flag and do it for king and country.
If TAO can legally do things no one else can, who are they hacking and why? Not much is known about who Tailored Access Operations hacks, but the Snowden leaks revealed one major target: Osama bin Laden. TAO hacked into the mobile phones of al-Qaeda operatives in the hunt for bin Laden, as reported by the Washington Post. The unit's work also led to the capture of 40 insurgents in Afghanistan. Ryan Gallagher is an investigative reporter at The Intercept, where he has covered the role of surveillance in the ongoing war on terror.
How did TAO and how does TAO fit into the war on terror?
Well, they're very important. I mean, people don't necessarily think of surveillance even as a thing being integral to what the military's doing on the ground, but it is. It's absolutely vital. What the tailored access guys are doing, for instance, is because they're so skilled at actually, breaking into systems and going after like what they would refer to as hard targets, people who are elusive or skilled at like dodging surveillance. They are very important at actually tracking down people who are then subsequently killed or captured. In past years, probably rendered through the black sites program that was going on through the Bush administration. So they are very entwined with these physical kind of kinetic, they call it, operations on the ground.
So are they basically the commandos of the NSA?
You could put it like that, yeah. I mean, they're kind of, it's maybe sort of glorifying them a little bit, but I mean, essentially these guys are just sort of like geeky nerds, but they do kind of do that sort of commando type role. They're facilitating military operations on the ground by hacking into targets. They're actually directly, able to track people who are then like killed in, say, a drone strike. So what they do, it is like kind of commando work, but they are also, providing assistance on the ground to real commando types who are out there trying to kill people.
In the hunt for bin Laden, TAO reportedly used what the unit calls implants, spy devices installed in mobile phones or other hardware. Implants are just some of the tools that appear in a leaked document called the Ant Catalog, which lists other spy gear at TAO's disposal. Security researchers Michael Osman, Joe Fitzpatrick, and Dean Pierce decided to build some of these spy tools themselves.
The media kind of saw it and reported on bits and pieces of it and said, oh, look at this thing, this is magic. And I think all of us looked at it and said, oh, yeah, I know how I would do that. Yeah, I know how to do that.
Joe recreated a graphics card that can see what's running on a computer's active memory. And Dean rigged a phone so it picks up the mobile traffic in the area. Mike reproduced RageMaster, a tiny chip implanted in a computer video cable to reflect information via radar.
When this is installed, I can point one antenna at it, and that's transmitting a signal, and then my other antenna is also pointed at it, and it's receiving the reflection. By measuring that reflection, I can, on my laptop, recover information that's going over the cable. And what I get is a video image, a screen image from the target computer system. And this is an example of something where an implant is required.
Getting an implant into a piece of hardware, like a video cable, requires physical access. But planting bugs into terrorists' cell phones isn't the only thing TAO does. Some of their activity has jeopardized internet security at large. One Snowden leak shows how TAO found a vulnerability, a software bug, in Mozilla Firefox. TAO used the bug to try to identify some users also running an anonymizing software called Tor. Not only did TAO need to be able to monitor and hijack internet traffic to pull off its attack, but hundreds of millions of Firefox users were left vulnerable to the software bug, which has since been patched.
Claudio? Can I hear you?
Hacker Claudio Guarnieri has helped expose TAO's activities.
Let's try.
I met him in an old Stasi surveillance tower that still stands in what used to be Soviet-controlled East Berlin.
A lot of the mass surveillance and bulk collection capability of the NSA is empowered by some of the break-ins that TAO is able to do. For example, they would ask TAO to break into some core parts of the internet infrastructure, of the whole global backbone. From an internet structure perspective, when you connect from Germany to Google, you move through a number of hubs, 10, 15 nodes that relay your message from Berlin to Hamburg and Frankfurt, and then to, who knows, Netherlands, wherever the cables are. If the NSA is able to break into any one of these points, then they're able to see you communicating with Google. When they're able to observe that, they're also able to hijack it. So pretend like you're getting a response from Google, while instead you're getting a response from the NSA.
None of this comes cheap. Claudio and I went inside to look through a Snowden leak known as the Black Budget. The NSA spends more than $600 million a year for just the kind of offensive hacks TAO conducts.
Yeah, this is what it's being called the Black Budget. And the trend that we see is that, again, the balance between how much is invested in breaking things and how much is invested in protecting things is uneven. Part of the mandate of intelligence services is to keep the country secure. At the same time, from a technological perspective, they're undermining the security of the country.
And like you said, we all use the exact same internet.
Once it's broken for one, it's broken for all.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is it worth it to break something and keep it broken for catching one or two terrorists that you probably could catch otherwise?
Breaking into the internet or hacking into phones might make us all less secure. So is TAO's hacking really all that targeted? To find out more about who TAO targets, I met up with Robert M. Lee. He'd been out of the military for only a week. He was an Air Force cyber officer and also worked for an intelligence agency. He won't confirm or deny that's the NSA.
Cheers. Okay. How did you get into being a hacker?
So, the Air Force has a wonderful program where it volunteers you to do shit. And I joined the Air Force, said, "Here I am, Lord, what would you like me to do?" And they said, "Go be a cyber guy."
So if you were to take Snowden slides completely seriously, you'd think that it's all mass surveillance?
I actually, for the first time, ended up seeing slides that I had actually seen before in real life. I was like, holy shit, I've seen these ones. But once you bring something into the intelligence community, you don't delete files, everything is stored. And so there was some files that get translated out, they're truth, and they were just remnants of product pitches or something like that. And so I think that you can't take all the slides seriously.
We also know that there is something called TAO in the NSA. What is that team? What are they doing?
Yeah, so I think when you look at TAO, it's actually the thing that I think most of the community should be cool with, right? So I'm actually a huge privacy advocate. Ironically enough, I hate the idea of any sort of mass surveillance. From a perspective of TAO or whoever would be breaking into those networks, that's targeted, retained intelligence. And so privacy advocates should actually enjoy that. They should say, hey, mass surveillance sucks. We need more targeted surveillance. We need more targeted. If you're going to do intelligence, do the kind that you put resources into and have to think about and have to prioritize your own efforts. It's not going to be some dissident or accidentally picking up somebody else's communications.
So who are TAO's targets?
I don't know exactly their targets, right? I wouldn't be able to speak about it anyway, but I would say that it would be asinine to assume that anything in our national policy of interest isn't one of their targets, right? So if the president says global terrorism is something we're concerned with, well then TAO is not doing their job. The government's not doing their job if they don't go after it. Anything that the president wakes up in the morning and says, hey, this is important to me, anybody in the government who's not supporting his needs is not doing their job. So I would just, off virtue of that, say that TAO has to be doing that stuff, or they're incompetent and they're wasting taxpayer money. So you can't have it both ways.
Rob made a pretty convincing case for the so-called targeted surveillance TAO conducts, but investigative reporter Ryan Gallagher disagrees. He says the problem is that the unit's methods aren't as targeted as they seem.
TAO is doing some of the most aggressive work that NSA does. The traditional eavesdropping, where they're listening in on a phone call just by wiretapping a cable, which they call kind of passive surveillance, that's actually becoming almost secondary now to the active surveillance, they call it, which is attacking and hacking systems. And part of the reason for that is because increasingly networks and technologies adopting encryption. And so they can't listen to it by just tapping the cable, because then they can't read it or listen to it. It's just, jargon. Going forward, especially with this sort of boom in encryption, you're going to see more and more of these hacking attacks, to the point that there may come a stage in the future where it is described as a mass surveillance kind of technique.
TAO's hacking skills may be in higher demand than ever before. And while the group goes after terrorists, that's not all they do. How does TAO decide who to target? And are they really legitimate threats? The elite unit has gone after Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters, but the Snowden leaks also revealed the group hacked into the president of Mexico's emails. And workers at a Belgian telecommunications company were spied on by the British, possibly with help from TAO.
Generally, there is consensus that mass surveillance is a bad thing, while targeted surveillance is tolerable because they go after very specific individuals or very specific groups. However, there's multiple things that you need to consider. One is what makes a legitimate target. Ultimately the NSA only has to respond to somehow to the US government, but they have no respect whatsoever towards foreigners. In Soviet cases where they spied on UNICEF, they spied on foreign ministries, they spied on private companies, energy companies, so what at that point makes it legitimate to hack directly and target a certain organization? We don't know.
One of the Snowden documents that came out about the tailored access group is one of the guys from within the unit is saying, look, we don't just do terrorism, we do everything. We do all operations, we're here to support any operations. I think it's one of the common kind of misconceptions that the government has managed to build up around a lot of these revelations. So it's like, don't worry about it. We're only going after these extreme terrorist people who are, we're trying to protect you and all that. But that's kind of disingenuous because that's not at all just what they're doing. They're doing a lot more than that.
Ultimately, it seems TAO may be just one more tool in the NSA's mass surveillance arsenal.
What happens in a mass surveillance regime, you sweep up essentially everybody. Everybody, by definition, becomes a target, which means there's no target. The problem is that when you do this in secret and you protect your secret powers, this usually doesn't end well in terms of history. It just doesn't. In 1984, the extraordinary George Orwell novel, the only place he could go to out of sight was in the corner, because that's where the surveillance cameras couldn't reach, which meant what? They knew where he was. And remember, people forget, even in 1984, he didn't prevail. He basically cried uncle. You can't fight them, can't beat them, join them.
You're a whistleblower, you cried uncle to some extent, or you cried out.
Yeah.
Do you think it was worth it?
Yeah. History was at stake.
We know the NSA's elite hacking unit has helped capture terrorists, but they've also targeted friendly nation states. So who else have they gone after? For now, much of TAO's work remains shrouded in secrecy. But privacy activists, whistleblowers, and others aren't giving up on the fight to know more and to live surveillance-free. I'm going to meet someone who believes he's a victim of cyber mercenary surveillance. Messe Makuch is a journalist for ESAT, an Ethiopian news network. From this nondescript office, Messe and his team can influence a country of more than 99 million.
So why don't you explain to me what ESAT is?
ESAT is an independent media organization. Is established by Ethiopian journalists who have been fled from Ethiopia because of the situation in Ethiopia. We are working for the people of Ethiopia, the voice for the voiceless. So we are giving platform to the opposition.
And you're all journalists in exile?
Yeah, all. The last 10 years, more than 100 journalists now have been fled.
Why are the government going after journalists?
Media is their first enemy. There is no free media in Ethiopia. People working as a free media, they think that they are against the government, and whenever you speak against the government, you are a terrorist.
The Ethiopian government has been consistently singled out by the UN and Human Rights Watch for instances of targeting journalists for doing their work.
The Ethiopian government continued harassing opposition members. Several coalition members in Oromia and southern Ethiopia are also intimidated, detained, and tortured for their involvement in politics.
In December 2013, ESAT employees were targeted with a series of malware attacks through Skype.
I got this friend request, and the logo of the person who sent me a friend request is ESAT's logo. So I thought that it is a friend, and he's not a bad guy, so let me accept him. When I accept him, he sent me immediately a PDF file. And I tried to open, there is my computer, full of broken words, and I got shocked.
To find out who was behind the attack and how they did it, I traveled to San Francisco to speak with Bill Martzak of Citizen Lab, a cyber surveillance watchdog. When he came across the ESAT file Massey received, he got in contact with Massey and examined the malware that had infected his computer.
What did you discover?
So what we did was we looked at the server which the spyware was communicating with to see if we could figure out any clues about the spyware's origin. The reason why spyware communicates with a server is because it steals information off of your computer and it needs to send it to the attacker somewhere. And one of the things we noticed is that the server actually returned an SSL certificate that said issued by HTSRL.
An SSL certificate is a digital certificate used to authenticate and create a secure link between a website and an end user.
And it also contained in the description RCS Certification Authority, and RCS being the acronym for Remote Control System, which is a product of an Italian company known as Hacking Team.
Based in Italy, Hacking Team has branded itself a global supplier of spyware, with ads like this, featuring a shady black hat hacker to hawk their tools and support services.
Rely on us.
But they're not the only game in town. Companies like Finfisher, Cyberbit, and Trovacore also sell surveillance software. Their spyware can surveil cell phones, monitor your computer's camera and microphone, and steal emails, passwords, contacts, and files.
So we issued this report through Citizen Lab, and immediately, Hacking Team issued their denials. But interestingly, we were monitoring the command and control server which the spyware had communicated with, and we noticed that it was very quickly pulled offline.
And then the hacks came back.
The hacks came back, yes. In 2014, there were several instances where members of ESAT received emails containing Hacking Team spyware.
Who was targeting them?
When we traced this spyware to this endpoint, it was an internet address registered to a satellite company, which provides services across all of Africa and the Middle East and some places in Europe. And we queried this range of IP addresses, and we found that one of them had identified itself as INSA PC. I was like, okay, Google, what is INSA? And the first hit was Ethiopian Information Network Security Administration, Government of Ethiopia. I was like, okay, this is it.
Citizen Lab caught the Ethiopian government trying to spy on journalists, and the spyware they used was supplied by Hacking Team. But the one guy who could really explain the bigger picture was Citizen Lab's director, Ron Diebert.
You've taken a particular interest in digital surveillance tools. Why is that?
There is a huge market for surveillance technologies, and what we found is that that market extends to some of the world's most notorious autocratic regimes and human rights abusing countries. And that's a problem from a human rights perspective. Surveillance in and of itself is not a bad thing. It is, I think, naive to expect we'd ever go back to any sort of pristine time where there is no surveillance. That is just part of human nature. A government is a surveillance machine. From the 15th century to today, it's the same. The question is, what is that surveillance for, and are there proper checks and balances around it? That applies to what Citizen Lab does, it applies to what Google does, it applies to what the United States does.
Or Ethiopia.
Or Ethiopia, yeah.
How do you feel that there's a company in Italy that's a free country selling cyber surveillance tools to your country?
It is very, very unfortunate to, learn that these democratic countries, helping dictatorship in Africa.
Hacking Team had been caught red-handed, so I wanted them to explain why they knowingly armed an authoritarian regime with their surveillance tools. In 2013 and 2014, the Ethiopian government targeted journalists with spyware supplied and supported by an Italian company called Hacking Team.
I think the view that we need 100% privacy and anything else comes second is a short-sighted view and doesn't recognize the realities of the digital world.
Eric Rabe is Hacking Team's chief marketing and communications officer. We met in New York.
How about the case of Ethiopia?
Yeah, Ethiopia is a country that we became convinced was using the software in an inappropriate way against a person here in the U.S., a purported journalist. The Ethiopian government, frankly, argued that that person was also a member of an organization that was actively trying to overthrow the government, and that's why they wanted to surveil him. So it was a legitimate sale to a customer who seemed to need it and seemed to be willing to use it in an appropriate way. When we found out differently, we suspended business with Ethiopia, and they're not a client anymore.
These are some pretty powerful tools that you're selling. What do they do exactly?
Well, they allow surveillance of activity in the digital space, with everything encrypted from end to end, phone calls and internet communications and email messages. The only way an investigator can actually tell what somebody is doing in that digital space is by accessing those tools either before they're encrypted or after they're decrypted. And that happens only in one place, and that's on the device itself. So this software allows observation of that activity on the device.
So are these legitimate tools, you think?
I think they are legitimate tools, and I think they're really necessary for law enforcement. This is not about, listening in on your cell phone conversation. This is about surveilling the activities of somebody who's either thinking about breaking the law or who's actually broken it.
Although he has no direct evidence, Messe believes that the data gathered by the Ethiopian government through Hacking Team's software had devastating consequences for his colleagues.
Did any of the people that you were contacting go to jail because of that hack?
Yeah, 3 of our contacts are now in jail.
So Hacking Team malware essentially helped put Ethiopians in jail?
Definitely.
So you talk about privacy, security. What about human rights?
I don't think Hacking Team is the principal human rights enforcement agency for the world. We're a software company that serves law enforcement. That's what we do. We're not embarrassed about it. We think it's important.
We spoke to people at ESAT who were the targets of Ethiopian hackers. And they wondered why Hacking Team would sell to a country who has obvious human rights violations.
Ethiopia was not on anybody's blacklist. There was no prohibition that any country, the US, the EU, NATO, or anybody else had against Ethiopia at the time that software was sold.
That said, it doesn't take a global affairs PhD to know that they've violated some really basic human rights.
Well, then I would suggest that the appropriate channel is for Italy, for example, to refuse to allow us to sell there, or for the UN to act.
But then who's responsible for what happens in the fallout of using these tools? Does Hacking Team absolve themselves of that, or?
No, I don't think so, but I think the human rights organizations are unable to get to the countries involved who are really responsible for the human rights abuses. So they turn to, those that they can reach. That is, companies like Hacking Team. It's not an unreasonable political tactic to use, but I don't think it's reasonable to say that Hacking Team is responsible for human rights abuses.
But not everyone agrees. On July 5th, 2015, an infamous hacker known as Phineas Fisher breached the Hacking Team servers, exfiltrating over 400 gigabytes of documents and posting them online for anyone to see. Security experts around the world celebrated the leak on Twitter. All of Hacking Team's dirty laundry spilt onto the internet, exposing price lists and software source code. Client lists showed sales to the FBI, DEA, and US Army. Even an officer with the campus police force at UC Santa Barbara was interested in buying its malware. It also showed that Hacking Team was selling to governments notorious for human rights abuses. Places like Kazakhstan, Bahrain, and Sudan.
Maybe the hack was a good thing. It was a kick in the ass.
I don't think it was a good thing. It was it was a criminal act. It was. I mean, there's sort of something about, we hacked into a company. It's kind of cool. It's sort of Robin Hood, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not Robin Hood. It's Al Capone. This is illegal. You can't, just because you disagree with somebody, destroy them or attempt to destroy them.
And what about the hacker who hacked you guys? Phineas Fisher.
I would love to meet him.
I wanted to meet the legendary Phineas Fisher too, but that would prove to be pretty complicated. Because after the leak, like any skillful hacker, Phineas Fisher kept a low profile. A black hat hacker had hacked Hacking Team's servers, stealing hundreds of gigabytes of data. After leaking it online, Phineas Fisher all but disappeared. But with an assist from my colleague at Vice's tech and science site, Motherboard, we finally negotiated interview terms. Since we wouldn't be able to show his face, the hacker had a strange request. He would only do the interview if he was represented by a puppet. These are the exact words from our live text exchange, voiced by one of my colleagues.
What was the goal in hacking the hacking team data? Were you trying to stop them?
For the lulz, I don't really expect leaking data to stop a company, but hopefully it can at least set them back a bit and give some breathing room to the people being targeted with their software.
We spoke to some Ethiopian journalists who were targeted by their government using hacking team software, and they wanted to thank you.
Cool. Kind of weird seeing my hacking addiction, hobby, actually affecting people in the real world in a positive way.
What do you think of surveillance companies and hacking team specifically?
I would say they're people with no morals going where the money is, but it's maybe not entirely true. I imagine I'm not all that different from hacking team employees. The same addiction to that electronic pulse and the beauty of the bod. I imagine if you come from a background where you see police as largely a force for good, then writing hacking tools for them makes some sense. But then Citizen Lab provides clear evidence it's being used mostly for comic book villain level of evil. And all the Finn Fisher and hacking team customers where targets of the spying have been identified in Bahrain, Ecuador, Mexico, Ethiopia. It's all investigative journalists, dissidents, political opposition, etc. being targeted. Not real crime, but threats to those in power.
While Hacking Team was selling spyware to law enforcement agencies tasked with catching criminals, they also sold to authoritarian regimes who used their wares to crack down on dissent. Other details revealed through the Hacking Team data dump was information about companies that were supplying Hacking Team with the technology to build their spy tools. Security firm Netrogard was singled out for selling them a zero-day. That is, an undiscovered security flaw in software that can be exploited to penetrate a system. Buying and selling zero days is legal, but covert. While they can be used to test and improve a company's network security, zero days can also be used to inject malicious software into a computer.
A piece of technology that I created, well, brokered really, because I didn't really create it, but a piece of technology that I brokered, a deal that I was involved with, potentially armed these rogue nations with a tool that let them break into these other systems. I didn't want any part of that.
Adriel Disotels admitted to selling a zero-day exploit to Hacking Team after the ESAT hack.
I think that it should be your responsibility to make sure that you are not selling to somebody that you believe will do anything malicious.
That said, Netrogard, respected, above-board company, you sold to Hacking Team.
I know.
When you misuse a zero-day, who's more at fault, the broker or the end user?
When you misuse a zero-day, the end user, absolutely. I mean, if I sell, I'm Nike, and I sell shoes to some guy, and he runs down a woman and rapes the woman, isn't Nike's fault for selling the sneakers? Or what about Microsoft? How many people have been hacked by somebody using Microsoft's operating system? Microsoft's not accountable for that, right? The ethics of it and the responsibility of it are up to the actor, or the team that are responsible for executing that specific operation.
Adriel's moral dilemma seemed hard to avoid in the gray market where zero days are bought and sold, a market fueled by a booming cyber arms trade. So I went to London to meet Edna Manovic, a cyber surveillance researcher for Privacy International.
So have you always been interested in the arms trade?
Yeah, just coming from Bosnia, I've been interested in conflict and the arms trade and foreign policy and so on.
Right, how the weapons get where they...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Does this surveillance market, does it mirror at all the conventional weapons market?
What you've got in the arms market is a system whereby governments have some kind of control over the exports. So they would be able to say to this company, you're selling this, we want to be able to control who you're selling that to. At the moment, that doesn't exist for the surveillance market because much of the technology is new. Governments need to step in and say that if a product is being sold from their country to a regime where it's going to be used for human rights abuses, they need to be able to stop that.
And who are the major players in it? Who are buying these technologies?
It would be countries without their own capability to develop these kind of tools, which oftentimes tend to be authoritarian countries.
Where are these companies based that are selling them?
Generally, they tend to be in well-developed countries with big ICT and defense and security sectors.
How big is this industry?
That's really one of the scariest things, is that because it's so secretive that nobody actually knows. There's been a few estimates by people in the industry, somewhere in the region of $5 billion a year. But ultimately, because it's so secretive, there's just no way of knowing. They want it to be kept a secret.
So it stays in the shadows that way.
Stays in the shadows.
Cyber profiteers are getting rich from a growing arms and surveillance market. But cloaked in secrecy, there's no way of knowing how big it really is. And Citizen Lab director Ron Diebert thinks there's an even more fundamental problem.
It's only going to continue to grow, and once states' armed forces and intelligence agencies start equipping themselves, their adversaries take it as a challenge and do the same, and it ratchets up constantly. There are certain conditions that tend to favor arms races, and if you look at the environmental conditions around cyberspace, many of them are there. So, like, you know, offense has the advantage, speed and so on. It's very difficult to verify. So
Wow, that's a scary proposition.
Yeah, we don't have enough weight behind the idea of watching the watchers.
Marietje Schaake is a member of the European Parliament from Holland. She's been leading the charge to include spyware under international arms law.
Do you think the vendors are responsible if they make a sale to an authoritarian regime?
Well, they should be helped in making the right assessment. If a company like Hacking Team can operate legally, that is the most clear sign that our laws are outdated and desperately need to be updated to make sure that there is no unintended consequences and that we stop this gray and unregulated market from growing on the way it does.
But can you really regulate police computer code?
The fact of the matter is that we don't have official laws that provide for transparency and accountability in this market. There's only very few measures, such as the Wassenaar Arrangement or such as sanctions on specific countries like Iran and Syria, the worst of the worst human rights violators.
Hacker Phineas Fisher thinks there's not much difference between the good guys and the bad guys anyway.
The difference between authoritarian regimes and democratic ones is the Hacking Team customers jail, torture, and kill, where the democratic ones have gentler ways of managing dissent.
But many in the international community do see good and bad guys. And that's why they drafted the Wassenaar Arrangement, which regulates the export of both conventional arms as well as technology that can be used as arms. It's been signed by 41 countries. In 2013, network surveillance and intrusion software was added to its list of restricted items.
I think that arrangement, as it's built today, will help to destroy the security industry.
Adriel is one of the many security researchers critical of the arrangement.
If you take a company that operates in multiple countries, that company might suffer a breach, and we might have a piece of technology here, that is somehow regulated because of offensive capabilities. With Wassenaar in place, you can't just send that information over to your other division. You have to go and apply for the license and do all this other stuff, and by that time the hackers have had a field day and taken whatever they wanted. It prevents fast response. I believe it was written with good intention, but I believe it was written by politicians and people who didn't really understand the nature of zero days, and more importantly, they didn't understand how gray the boundaries are.
Despite the gray boundaries, Hacking Team claims to be in full compliance with the Wassenaar Arrangement. But in the wake of the leak, the Italian government revoked Hacking Team's global license. They now have to apply for an individual license every time they want to export their software outside of Europe. A sign that times may be changing for spyware manufacturers.
If you could say anything to the hacker who hacked Hacking Team, what would you say?
Please keep on hacking these hackers and expose them. They are fueling dictatorship in Ethiopia.
The market for spyware is growing fast. Without tough legislation around the sale of these cyber weapons, anyone can be a target, including me, including you. As a national security reporter for Vice, I followed the Syrian war since the beginning. In 2011, a popular democracy movement blew up across the Middle East. It was fueled in part by social media, became known as the Arab Spring. Yet Syria was different. It stayed quiet. Run by a dictator named Bashar al-Assad, citizens were terrorized by secret police, mass surveillance, torture, and barely had any access to the internet. Amidst protests in nearby countries, the Assad regime made the mistake of restoring access to Facebook and YouTube. Almost overnight, protests exploded across the country. I needed to talk to someone who was on the streets when protests first went down.
3 weeks after I got there, the street protests began, and that quickly overshadowed everything else we were doing.
Robert Ford was the last U.S. ambassador to serve in Syria.
So when he did open up the internet, it couldn't have just been for benevolent reasons. There must have been also a surveillance aspect to it.
When the revolution in Syria started, initially, I don't think the regular foot police and secret police goons really understood what social media was. I met once with a protester, and he was detained. This was in the suburbs of Damascus. When he was taken to the secret police station, they went through his backpack in front of him, and they were taking everything out, and they said, "Where is the Facebook? Where is the Facebook?" As if it was like a book with pages. So that was early on. As time went on, the Syrian secret police got a lot better at monitoring people's computers and monitoring social media.
Protests continued, but Assad wouldn't cede his power. Instead, he sent soldiers to try and quell the uprising. The world watched the bloody crackdown play out on YouTube. Dilshad Othman was uploading videos to YouTube and Facebook during the early days of the revolution. It made him a target of the government, and he had to flee the country. For his safety, we chose an anonymous location to talk.
Video content was the most important content coming out from Syria. We've lost a lot of our friends while they were filming.
Snipers targeting people with cameras?
Absolutely, sniper targeting people, or checkpoint will stop you and check what's in your phones.
But was the regime able to crack into Facebook, or at least hack into it in some way, and get some of that information that would help them crack down on protesters?
Yes, they were able to get a lot of accounts. They were able to hack into a lot of Syrian opposition leaders at that time. And going back to May 2011, that was the first time when the Syrian government implemented man-in-the-middle attack against the SSL certificate of Facebook.
And explain to me what a man-in-the-middle attack is.
The term man-in-the-middle attack came because there is someone in the middle is trying to attack you. What the Syrian government did at that time is they pushed to the users a fake SSL certificate. Now, SSL is actually like an envelope and a key. Key is with Facebook. Facebook is sending you an envelope to put your data in, lock it, and then send it back to Facebook. But the Syrian internet providers, they received the envelope from Facebook. They replaced it with another one that they have the key for it.
Their own envelope.
Send it to the Syrian users. Users, they put their credentials, username and passwords, and messaging and posts and etc. stuff. They send it back. Syrian internet providers opened it, got a copy of data, then send it back to Facebook.
Assad was now using the internet to expose entire networks of activists. Once identified, they were often arrested, then tortured, sometimes to death. The international media exploded with headlines detailing police crackdowns and tales of torture, creating a public relations nightmare for Assad. Soldiers defected from Assad's forces. Some formed the Free Syrian Army, and the country descended into war between rebels and the regime. But Assad still had his supporters, some of whom were hackers. They decided to form a cyber militia. They called it the Syrian Electronic Army. Brian Merchant is a reporter at Motherboard who investigated the origins of the group. We met up at Vice's head offices in Brooklyn.
The Syrian Electronic Army is an activist hacker group. They're pro-Bashar al-Assad. They want to reveal the media as frauds. They want to reveal the Free Syrian Army as terrorists. And to do so, they basically institute a series of high-profile attacks.
So they're just propagandists?
Ultimately, that's what their role is, is propagandists.
They were mostly website defacements, but sometimes they had real-world consequences. The SEA hacked the Twitter account of the Associated Press and tweeted that the White House had been attacked. It caused the US stock market to dive until it was exposed to be a fake tweet. At the top of the militia hierarchy was a hacker known as the Pro. Brian received a tip allegedly exposing the Pro's identity. He contacted him.
I had been asking him, we have this information about you, and we basically can peg you as the leader. And he got really flustered and angry, and he denied it in a series of emails, and he said, if you reveal me, then you will be hacked. We will hack Vice.
Brian published his expose. The Pro made good on his word, and Vice was hacked. I decided to track down the Pro. He agreed to chat online. I asked him if the army of hackers viewed themselves as soldiers. He said internet soldier was the preferred term. The real soldiers were on the battlefield. I wanted to know if the SEA was under the official control of Assad. The Pro was adamant that they weren't affiliated with the government regime, but that they did use back channels to deliver important intelligence. Those channels proved potentially dangerous for opposition protesters.
They were capable of collecting a lot of information, hacking a lot of people. They published around 11,000 accounts. They were compromised in different ways.
And then passing this along to the regime.
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of organizing between them and the Syrian government, exchanging information between each other and exchanging targets between each other.
Months after speaking with him, the Pro, or Ahmed Umar Aga, as Brian identified, was indicted for hacking-related charges by the US government. The Syrian Electronic Army gained the attention of the world through PR-savvy hacks, but they weren't Assad's only hacker allies. In Syria, what began as a popular democracy movement rapidly escalated into a civil war. Assad had responded on the battlefield with an aggressive campaign of barrel bombs. Online, the Syrian internet was now infected with malware. Ava Galperin is a hacker. She started tracking cyber militias shortly after the street protests turned into a bloody conflict. It wasn't long before her research revealed the dangerous new militia known as the Syrian malware team. They were using the internet to gather intelligence on opposition forces.
To begin with, there isn't just sort of one Syrian malware team. We were able to track at least 2 distinct actors in this space. These 2 malware groups were targeting members of the Syrian opposition. So anybody who was opposed to Assad. And mostly these were people who are located inside of Syria, sometimes in territory that Assad still controlled, sometimes in territory that Assad no longer controlled, and sometimes members of the Syrian diaspora, which became sort of more influential and more powerful as the conflict has raged on and more people have left.
And the tools they were using were very different.
Yes, the malware teams that we were tracking were using remote access tools like Extreme Rat, Dark Comet, Black Shades.
And something like a rat, how does it work exactly?
So a remote access tool is a tool that once an attacker gets you to install it on your machine, allows them to do anything that you can do on your computer. So they can log all of your keystrokes, they can take screenshots, they can see through your webcam, they can listen through your microphone, anything that you're capable of doing, they can do, and then they can exfiltrate that data back to themselves. And these remote access tools are very cheap or free, but they can still get you, full control of somebody's computer if you can get somebody to install them on their computer.
In 2012, Assad's forces used Dark Comet to monitor opposition groups in Aleppo. They hid the malware in a PDF that claimed to hold instructions on how to help the city, which was under siege by the regime. As soon as the target downloaded the PDF, the malware was installed, and Assad's opponents were under surveillance.
And these were people that were still in Syrian territory and territory controlled by Assad. And so if you compromise them, things got very, very dangerous for them because Assad could come and have them, arrested and then killed.
The cyberspace in Syria now is ridiculously dirty, full of malware, full of phishing, full of a lot of cyber attacks that it really made it unsafe space for any users.
Different factions looking for intelligence they can feed to their groups.
They don't care if it's malware, if it's going to open a backdoor in your machine to some other factor. They don't care. They just need to get access.
Sounds a lot like the actual war.
It is exactly like the actual war. It is 100% a reflect for the actual war that's happening.
Soon, Dark Comet was used to further escalate Syria's cyber war. Pro-Assad hackers, difficult to attribute but now all over the Syrian internet, launched an attack designed to steal battle plans from the Free Syrian Army. The plans detailed a strategy to retake the town of Kirbet Gazaleh, a key city for the rebellion. Nart Villeneuve was working as a researcher for FireEye when he first discovered the hack, and he was the perfect person to tell me how the battle plans were stolen.
There was hand-annotated maps. Pictures of them were taken with cell phones and distributed to the fighting units. Lists of individuals with their names, phone numbers, whether or not they had weapons. That stuff is extremely valuable in a conflict zone.
The hack wasn't technically complex. Instead, it relied on social engineering, a technique where hackers trick their targets through psychological manipulation. Hackers initiated contact through Skype, presenting themselves as beautiful women.
They would initiate conversations, try to establish a little bit of rapport with them, ask them to send them a picture of themselves, flatter them a little bit, and then say, do you want to see a picture of me? When they would send that picture, really that was the malware. They would compromise that individual, and then they would be able to harvest this full Skype chat histories of anyone else who used that computer as well. We obviously can't jump straight to concluding who's ultimately responsible, but it definitely looks like it is a group that is acting to benefit the Assad regime and has some sort of connection to Lebanon.
It made sense that hackers in Lebanon, possibly affiliated with Hezbollah, might be supporting Assad. Hezbollah is Iran's political proxy in Lebanon, and Iran is the Syrian regime's ally.
We found a document that is supposedly a leaked document from Syrian intelligence that we can't verify that talks about the exact tactics that we see this group using to target the opposition, including the use of fake female personas to try to entrap individuals and other efforts to discredit the opposition online.
By 2013, Hezbollah was engaging Syrian rebels on the battlefield. Now, pro-Assad hackers based in Lebanon were engaging them in cyberspace too. But support from Syria's allies wasn't enough for Assad to keep an emerging threat at bay: the Islamic State. In Syria, the war was causing the country to fracture. Then ISIS arrived. The jihadis set up their capital in Raqqa. They took over the land and unleashed a wave of terror. Like the Electronic Army and the malware teams that had come before them, the Islamic State would also go after their opponents on the digital front line. Their crimes were documented in high-profile execution videos, distributed over the internet.
نشعر بأن هؤلاء ليسوا من البشر من شيء. لكن بداية هم عندما ينشرون هذه الأشرطة إعلاميا هم يريدون أن يوجهوا رسالة إرهاب لكل من هو تحت سلطة هؤلاء.
Rami Abdul Rahman knows what it's like to be targeted by ISIS. He's a Syrian activist who now lives in the UK after seeking asylum over 15 years ago. His work exposing war crimes in Syria made him a target. He was hacked by the terror group's supporters, photoshopped in front of Jihadi John, the infamous ISIS executioner. His data was targeted and his server was destroyed.
How did that make you feel to see yourself in an orange jumpsuit?
بشكل مؤكد كانت هذه المرة الأولى التي شعرت فيها بتهديد جدي وشعرت فيها أن الموت قريب مني. يعني ما الغريب أن يطالوك في بريطانيا وهناك مئات الجهاديين من بريطانيا ذهبوا للانضمام إلى هذا التنظيم. من الممكن أن يأتي شخص في بريطانيا ويقول أنا أقتلك ليتقرب إلى الله مثل ما يفعله في سوريا بعد أن يتعرض لعملية غسيل دماغ.
But who was behind the hack? I'd already been communicating with Islamic State fighters online. Some of them were as easy as a text message away. Junaid Hussein was allegedly one of these fighters. In Syria, he was known as Abu Hussein al-Britani, the architect of the Islamic State's cyber army. But before he traveled to Syria to join ISIS, Junaid was a regular kid from England, best known as Trick, of the now disbanded UK hacking collective, Team Poison. I traveled to Newcastle to meet with Junaid's former hacking colleague, MLT. For security reasons, we can't show his face.
What was Trick like back in the day before all of this Islamic State stuff?
A few years ago, he was just sort of normal. He'd come out for a drink. He enjoyed all the things sort of normal British people did, because he was British. He was, like, grew up here, went to school here and everything.
Trick hacked the email of Tony Blair's personal assistant. Together with MLT, he flooded the anti-terror hotline of MI6 with prank phone calls.
Do you know about Team Poison?
Oh, yeah. I've heard about Team Poison, yeah.
We embarrass governments and the police.
Yeah. Okay.
They did it as an act of political protest, but also for the lulz. It got them both arrested, but only Junaid went to jail.
Did prison change Junaid?
Yeah, definitely became a lot more bitter, a lot more sort of hard-nosed, he sort of withdrew into himself. Became a lot less outgoing, became a lot less, like, up for a laugh. He became a lot more serious, and then that's when he started really getting into, like, hating the UK government, hating the authorities, and I think he felt a lot more, like, persecuted, a lot more unwanted by society.
How did he radicalize?
I honestly don't know. Like, it just seemed to happen like that. Like, it didn't seem to be a gradual process at all. It was just like he was normal, sound guy, and then I don't know when it exactly happened, but I think it started in prison.
Because I guess after the Tony Blair hack, he was probably one of the most famous hackers in Britain.
Yeah, exactly. So his profile was out there, he was in the news, people knew about him. So I'm not sure whether they reached out to him or if he reached out to them, but it just seemed to happen overnight. And then obviously he ended up going to Syria. I was still in contact with him when he was over there, but I couldn't consider him a friend anymore, like considering what he was involved with.
Was he a skilled hacker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like sort of getting into Facebook accounts wasn't really a thing for him. You could just do it like that, which is why I'm guessing he got so high up within the Islamic State. Obviously, they valued his skills and ability, and he was a massive target for the USA. If he was that big a target, that was for a reason.
In August 2015, Junaid was killed in a US airstrike. But before he was assassinated, Junaid is thought to have carried out another cyber attack. This one was designed to expose the location of the Islamic State's critics so they could be captured and killed. In Syria, cyber attacks were used by groups affiliated with the Assad regime to wage war online. When ISIS arrived, they seemed to adopt similar techniques to target their opponents. ISIS claims the men being executed in this video are members of Raqqas being slaughtered silently, a group of activists who document and expose the atrocities of the so-called Islamic State. Hamoud Mohammed Al-Mosa is in charge of cybersecurity for the group. He agreed to Skype with me from an undisclosed location.
Hamoud, do you want to explain to me how ISIS was hunting down members of your organization online?
حمود كيف ايسيس كانوا عم يلاحقوكم على الانترنت يعني كيف قدروا يوصلوا لكم او اذا قدروا؟
وصلني على الايميل باتش مشفر شخص ادعى انه هو من الحكومه الكنديه حابب يعمل بحث ودراسات عن مدينه الرقه فبعث لي مجموعه صور من الرقه حابين نتاكد من مكانها واذا فيكم تحطوا لنا اللوكيشن تبعها كارقام. هو الرساله كلها كان مشكوك فيها انه الحكومه الكنديه ما بتجي تحاكيني بالطريقه هاي او ما بتجي تطلب مني انا كشخص او كمجموعه هيك طلبات. اخذت الملف حللنا بعد التحليل طلع هو باتش لمراقبه اللوكيشن والسيطره على الجهاز بشكل كامل.
He can't fully prove it, but Hamoud believes Junaid Hussain orchestrated the attack so that ISIS could locate and kill their opposition. Fortunately, Hamoud wasn't fooled by the phishing attack, and he didn't download the malware. But did others, and were they killed as a result?
ISIS is almost adopting everything that was successful in Syria. We're talking about images, we're talking about video, we're talking about cyber attacks.
And again, these were techniques that were essentially tried and true from earlier phases of the Syrian civil war.
Exactly. And then here we are, they're adopting it again.
The war in Syria showed that armies of hackers can assist soldiers in the battlefield because the tools are both easy to use and free to acquire.
This is a set of tools that are increasingly available to everybody. So the whole idea is that these tools are no longer just in the hands of the Chinese or Russian or American government, that people like you and me, only with far worse intentions, now have these tools and can engage in relatively sophisticated spying.
And the same goes for a battlefield.
Absolutely. As the war becomes hot, and as battlefield intelligence becomes more important, this sort of surveillance and espionage becomes part of the battlefield and part of the battle plan.
In a lot of cases, it's simple social engineering, but they're very effective at it. The types of targets that they're going after are usually individuals active on Twitter and Facebook, so they don't need to use anything particularly advanced to get the job done.
In Syria, the issue is not only the hacking itself, but the inability of the targets to protect themselves.
You can really no longer be sure what side you're seeing or what kind of actor is involved or whether you're seeing some sort of false flag. It just gets murkier and murkier with every year.
Syria is a country, or used to be a country, that government is watching you by default. You're under surveillance by default. Syrians, they were not able actually to change their behaviors, to know that they have rights of their own privacy or to protect themselves. So the same things applies now on what's going on the cyber conflict in Syria. People have no knowledge about protection, or why do I have to protect myself? I thought that I have pretty good security protocols when it comes to encryption or circumvention or even protocols dealing with people. Unfortunately, until someone came and he was a journalist, not from Syria, and he starts filming me, and he was arrested. And they got access to all our information. And that was the minute that I have to leave the country immediately. So I found that security is not about yourself only, but it's about the whole network that you're working with.
When the pro-democracy movement started in 2011, few could have imagined that Syria would fracture into deadly chaos. And no one could have guessed what an important role the internet would play, not only on the battlefield, but crushing free speech and political reform. While the country's future hangs in the balance, one thing has become certain. Syria offers a terrible window into how the battles of the future can unfold, both off and online. In July 2015, the Washington-based U.S. Office of Personnel Management announced that the private records it kept in more than 22 million American civil servants had been stolen. The U.S. government never formally blamed China, but plenty of unnamed officials made the accusation in the press. Bill Evanina is in charge of combating foreign intelligence threats for the U.S. government.
I think the intelligence community feels pretty confident. We feel who's involved, but I'm not quite sure the administration has yet come out and identified or attributed that data, but we're pretty confident we know who was responsible.
What did they take?
What they stole, the perpetrators, were the SF-86s and SF-85s, which are the standard forms in which employees fill out to obtain security clearances. On those forms had a lot of proprietary information about you, who you live with, your social security number, your date of birth, what schools you went to, your employment history. So a lot of significant personally identifiable information that we consider very sensitive.
And how long will the intelligence community in the United States be feeling the ramifications of this?
Oh, I'm not sure we could put it in terms of years, but I would say maybe decades. I don't think this is anything that's going to be over in a year or two. I think the data that's on these forms can be used to target U.S. government employees and contractors for many, many years.
Were you personally?
Absolutely.
Sorry, you were personally impacted by it?
Absolutely. So I am one of the 22 million victims that have been identified in the OPM intrusion. So all my personal data from when I filled out my original form and subsequent background investigations I've gone through has been compromised.
How does that make you feel?
Like a victim.
Even though OPM was bad, it was classic espionage. Most countries would do it given the chance. But hacking US corporations to make money off of their property is another story.
We've agreed that neither the US or the Chinese government will conduct or knowingly support cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property, including trade secrets or other confidential business information for commercial advantage. In addition, we'll work together and with other nations.
President Obama has reason to be concerned. For years, Chinese hackers have been a problem for American business. But most companies kept quiet about it, and then Google broke the silence on their blog in January 2010. The American technology giant had been hacked, and China was to blame. But Google wasn't the only company targeted. It was just the first one to go public. A slew of other Fortune 500 corporations were also hacked in an attack now known as Operation Aurora.
What was interesting about Operation Aurora wasn't that it was some kind of new attack. It was that it was the first time an American company had had the courage to stand up and point the finger at China and say, we know you did this.
Nicole Perlroth is a cybersecurity reporter for the New York Times, and she's written extensively on Chinese hackers.
And Google, as open as they were about who had done it, they've been relatively close-lipped about what exactly was stolen. But the word on the street is that the Chinese were actually able to get a fair amount of Google's source code.
That source code could help Chinese hackers break into Google's products or to replicate them in the future.
What do we know about Chinese espionage?
We know that China has basically made it a core part of its economic mission to stop being the world's manufacturer and start innovating. Every 5 years, you see a new industry that China wants to excel at, and suddenly you just see a rush of cyber attacks towards whatever industry China has said that it wants to dominate in. It's paint formulas, it's Coca-Cola's negotiation strategies, it's think tanks, it's diplomats, it's university professors, it's law firms.
People have started to realize that this actually has become a serious issue, or?
I think it made people realize that some of the most vibrant companies in the United States were major targets, but I think it took another 5 years for companies that thought, why would we ever be the target of a state-sponsored Chinese cyber attack, to wake up and say, oh shit, we've been a victim too.
But how was everyone so sure China was behind Operation Aurora? I went to Washington to talk to Dmitry Alperovich, one of the first people to analyze the attack. He worked with many of the companies who were affected.
So how was it done?
It was actually pretty ingenious. So they actually identified people inside the organization that they were able to approach and social engineer them to click on a link.
So you're talking about phishing emails with malware payloads.
That's right. In some cases, it was actually innocent message, not even an email, that once you click on that link, your machine is compromised and the attackers take over.
And how did you figure out it was China?
Once we started tracking all the machines that were involved in the compromise, and there were these multiple of machines that were set up for command and control, and where the connections into those machines were coming from, we started to see signs that were pointing to Chinese activity. And later on, as we expanded the investigation, we started to uncover other activity that we were able to tie together to this group that we now call Aurora Panda, Chinese nation-state group that is really conducting, to this day, espionage activity into numerous organizations, government agencies, as well as private sector organizations across the globe.
Operation Aurora offers a glimpse into how Chinese hackers work within the country's government, or more specifically, its military branch, the People's Liberation Army, otherwise known as the PLA.
With these types of actors, they get in and they want to stay as long as possible because they have a collection priority. And even if they get discovered and kicked out, oftentimes they're back in or trying to get back in the next day because they still have a mission to do, right? This is oftentimes a military operation. You have a PLA general that's coming to you as a soldier in the PLA saying, I need you to get this information from me from this company. And you don't stop because it's hard, you don't stop because you've been discovered, you keep on going because you were given a mission by your boss to do so, and you don't disobey orders in the military.
And you need to achieve that objective.
Absolutely.
The hackers deployed malware using an unfixed flaw in Internet Explorer.
This is a real spearfish we detected at one of our customers. So let's go to our victim machine down here. I have an email that's arrived from a good friend of mine. And there's a Word document attachment that I want to take a look at. So who wouldn't click on this? I certainly would. So we just had the connection from the victim show up here. So this is our machine, our victim machine, that we are able to take over. I can go to this wonderful file manager, which looks like just any file manager you would normally have. So I literally can just highlight this and click receive, and it sends it over to my machine. That's as easy as it gets.
Operation Aurora showed that China was hacking some of America's biggest companies, and many of the attacks were attributed to hackers linked with the People's Liberation Army. If the Google hack and others like it are state-sponsored, that means the Chinese government is brashly stealing American intellectual property with one hand while making new trade deals with the other. The New York Times and Nicole Perlroth paired with a cybersecurity firm, Mandiant, to track down the physical location of some of the hackers. And they found them in Shanghai at a PLA unit known only as 61398.
We were able to trace thousands of attacks on US companies and companies in Europe and universities and research companies and think tanks back to this one building in Shanghai. And it was the first time a security firm had publicly pointed to, not just to China, but to a very specific unit of the PLA. There weren't a lot of windows, but it was clear they had some great satellite technology and it was very well guarded. But other than that, it was completely nondescript. It was not as high-tech as Fort Meade, but it was very clear this was actually a military compound.
To understand 61398, first you have to understand the relationship between business, government, and the military in China. Melissa Chan worked in Beijing as a correspondent for Al Jazeera for 5 years. Her reporting on politically sensitive issues got her kicked out of the country.
Did they give you a rough time when you were there?
They gave me and every foreign reporter a rough time. We all thought the reporting environment in 2012 was pretty bad. That was around the time when I left, and it's just gotten worse, according to foreign reporters still based there.
What do you make of Obama making cybersecurity top of the list when it comes to dealing with China?
I think it indicates how bad that situation is with cyber espionage. Every government has cyber espionage, right? Including the United States. You won't have an American intelligence officer meet with a Fortune 500 company CEO and just hand over data and say, here, this is what we got from the Chinese. But we do know that the Chinese do not see that differentiation. I mean, the thing you have to understand about Chinese companies, even publicly traded companies that are owned by private Chinese, that were started by private Chinese citizens, is that there's a corner office somewhere where there's a Communist Party representative. So the Communist Party is never far away from any Chinese company. There is always a connection to the government.
I spent months trying to speak with Chinese hackers. When I finally came close, I was shut down at the last minute. But I did get a glimpse through cybersecurity expert Ian Amit. Amit met with Chinese hackers at a tech conference in China.
We went to what was called ExcaliburCon. A bunch of us as Western security professionals, speakers, hackers, whatever it is, were invited to speak.
Were you ever offered to work for the Chinese government?
Yeah.
They just came out and asked you?
Oh, pretty much, yeah.
What was your response?
No. A very nice no, but yeah, they had us, they even took us to a tour in a business office building that was empty, and walked us around, showed us, this can be your office. Do you want the corner office? How many people do you need working for you? And they're not talking about like 5 or 6, like you need 50, 60, 100.
This is the office you would be given.
Yeah. And again, they built this in a year, 1 year, everything. Roads,
ridiculous.
Residential. Again, resources is not a problem. You just have a lot of people build shit.
How do you gauge Chinese hackers compared to, let's say the NSA? Are they good?
I would say the same rate, the same level.
Really?
If you assume any less of that, you're a fool.
Then why are they trying to poach American and Israeli?
More. Having a diversity is a key in cybersecurity. A lot of times when you bring in people that are not necessarily from your field of expertise can be a huge leverage in terms of your capabilities. I would do the same. I would try to recruit, I would try to tap into whatever resources there are that I'm not aware of that can enhance and enrich my capabilities. If they're grooming their local cyber expertise in-house, if I were on their end, I would try to do the same. I would try to bring in a lot of outside perspective, a lot of different thinking, different approach, because that's the key, especially in a game like cybersecurity. You have to be adaptive, you have to be creative.
For innovation.
Exactly, yeah.
Where the loss of American intellectual property was once kept secret, by 2014, the Obama administration was no longer silent. For the first time, the Department of Justice charged Chinese military hackers for breaking into U.S. corporations.
Today, we are announcing an indictment against 5 officers of the Chinese People's Liberation Army for serious cybersecurity breaches against 6 American victim companies. These represent the first ever charges against known state actors for infiltrating United States commercial targets.
The DOJ put 5 Chinese hackers on the FBI's most wanted list. All of them officers in the PLA's 61398. John Carlin tracks nation-states infiltrating U.S. corporations.
You'll see the activity from the location of this unit of the PLA 61398. It starts around 9 a.m. And you see the spike in activity. You go to around lunch, they get a little lunch break, and the activity goes down. Then it resumes again until the end of the day. And there seems to be roughly a 9 to 5
government job.
A government job. So we just can't, it's not fair to American companies.
And what evidence did you have against them?
We showed specific actions on specific times, on specific dates, and photographs of the individuals as they went into companies' systems from these dedicated hacker thieves who are going in and day out to steal information.
But they are wearing PLA member, uniforms. If this is a nation-state attack, why single out individuals?
We're not charging a country for generically doing something bad. We're proving up specific facts against particular people by name, by date. Here is what they did. So in this case, we were able to figure out the name and the face behind the keyboard. And the reason why our companies are getting hammered day in and day out by this type of theft is because the people behind the keyboard think they're anonymous. And these charges show you are not. And the fact is, just because you're wearing a uniform shouldn't give you a free pass when you commit that same type of theft.
China was stealing some of America's most precious intel, the kind of trade secrets that keep economies growing. For some companies, the results were devastating. China's been targeting all sorts of American companies for trade secrets. Daniel McGahn is president of American Superconductor, or AMSC. The company specializes in power technologies such as wind turbines and superconducting wire. In an effort to protect against hacking, they kept their valuable source code on an offline server. But in 2011, one of McGahn's employees took a $2 million bribe to hand over AMSC software code to a state-owned company in China.
Welcome to the future. The story really kind of falls out of a 1960s, 1970s vintage spy movie. The individual was approached, the individual was turned, there was offered money, home, women. The way he was motivated was in the techniques of spycraft. He had a penchant for writing everything down. If you know Skype, he tended to use Skype to be able to communicate and transfer files. So we were able to basically obtain everything from motive to when the transfers happened, to who received them, and kind of the end part, they won't need American Superconductor anymore.
What was the fallout?
The fallout was we had a stock that was at about $25 and it went to $12.5 in a day. So we went from about $1.6 billion to $800 million in valuation in a day. So the stock completely collapsed. We know we're on a targeted list of a lot of companies in North America that the Chinese are looking to obtain any valuable technology that they can. So we've had to try to develop a capability to protect such attacks.
So you're saying the People's Liberation Army has targeted your company in hacking operations to steal corporate secrets?
They've been happening since this event, and they've been happening subsequently on a very regular basis. What we've seen is when we've gone back and we've used third parties to try to validate, where do these attacks come from, and the entities that at least that they're telling us are directly linked to the PLA in China, the People's Liberation Army. There is a move within China to do this as part of kind of normal operation of business.
And you think this is sort of a precursor to trying to overtake America economically?
I don't see it as a precursor. It's happening. The desire is for China to be number one. They have the largest population in the world. Why shouldn't their economy be the largest?
Even after all this, would you still do business in China?
We still do. We still see China as an opportunity. But those products have to be paid for. Customers pay.
To add insult to injury, a wind turbine that was built by China and sold back to the US was running on the stolen source code. AMSC eventually replaced the turbine's controller and software with their own tech.
So this is actually one of the controllers that was stolen.
Yes. So the software stolen and the actual programming of the turbine.
Yeah.
This turbine's close, but it's definitely different.
TV. Oh my God. Oh. We are definitely 72 meters in the sky.
But it's not as if the US isn't spying on Chinese corporations. In 2014, Edward Snowden leaked a trove of National Security Agency documents that revealed Huawei, a Chinese telecom giant, was a US target. And according to the German magazine Der Spiegel, the NSA managed to access the source code of Huawei products in order to tap communications of targets who use them. But the US government says there's a difference between traditional espionage and stealing trade secrets for profit. So the administration is still holding out the threat of sanctions.
Do you think sanctions and diplomatic ploys, do you think that'll really work?
It will work because look at what they're stealing here. One case that we charged, they were stealing the formula for the color white. That is not a national security secret. They are stealing that so that they can compete and make paint, white paint that people think is popular. That's all driven by profit. This is a cost-benefit game. As long as they think it's cost-free to steal this information, they're going to continue to do it. And we need to keep raising the costs until the behavior changes.
With the help of stolen American-made IP, China has set its sights on overtaking the US as the #1 economic superpower in the world.
If we could put a dollar value on all this hacking against corporate America, what would it be?
It's impossible at this point. People have tried. The former commander of the Cyber Command has put it in the trillions. There's just how do you put a price on intellectual property?
And is this just the beginning, or what's the future hold for corporate America?
I think it's a question of, is it too late? Has the IP already left the building? And if it has, are we going to suddenly see carbon copies of Benjamin Moore and Coca-Cola and Lockheed Martin pop up in China over the next 10 years? And the next chapter is, when are we going to see China really using our own intellectual property to their economic advantage? And I don't even think we've seen the beginning of that yet.
It's tough to know what's next when China keeps such tight control on their hackers and almost no information leaks out of the country. But it's also hard to believe that the sophisticated cyber force of a rising superpower will suddenly just change its MO because America said so.